Praxis 5205 Teaching Reading Exam 89 Questions and Answers. Flashcard 1. A teacher reviews the following student scores on a standardized reading test with the goal of determining the areas in which the student will require additional instruction. 75th percentile in vocabulary knowledge, 85th percentile in decoding, 40th percentile in comprehension, 70th percentile in fluency. Based on the data, which of the following activities best addresses the student's needs? A. Reviewing high-frequency words. B. Identifying context clues in sentences. C. Listening to an audio version of the text. D. Using a plot chart to track the events in a story. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Using a plot chart to track the events in a story. Step 1. Look at the student's strengths and weaknesses. The question gives percentile scores. Vocabulary, 75th percentile, right arrow above average, white heavy, check mark, naughty. Concern, decoding, 85th percentile, right arrow, very strong, white heavy, check mark. Fluency, 70th percentile, right arrow, solid, white heavy, check mark. Comprehension, 40th percentile, right arrow, below average. This is the main weakness. The teacher's goal is to target the area of need, which is reading comprehension. Step 2. Why option D, using a plot chart, is correct. A plot chart helps a student to track key story elements, beginning, middle, end, identify main events, understand cause and effect in the story. These are all comprehension skills, which directly match the student's lowest score. White heavy, check mark. That makes D the best match for the student's needs. Step 3. Why the other options are wrong. A. Reviewing high-frequency words, right arrow. This targets word recognition / vocabulary, but the student is already strong here. B. Identifying context clues in sentences, right arrow. This focuses on vocabulary strategies, not overall comprehension of a text. C. Listening to an audio version of the text, right arrow. This supports fluency support or access, but doesn't teach comprehension strategies directly. Praxis test tip to remember when you see questions like this: find the lowest score, match the answer to a strategy that targets that skill. Flashcard 2. A kindergarten teacher plans a lesson designed to give students guided practice in learning a phonological awareness skill. Having students participate in which of the following activities best meets the teacher's goal? A. Asking students to follow along as the teacher moves a finger from left to right while orally reading a line of text in a picture book. B. Having students say the word airplane and then asking them to say it again without pronouncing air. C. Distributing a set of plastic letters to students and having them use the manipulatives to form decodable words. D. Cutting a student's name card into individual letters and modeling how to put the letters together to form the name. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Having students say the word airplane and then asking them to say it again without pronouncing air first. What is phonological awareness? Phonological awareness equals the ability to hear and manipulate the sounds in spoken words. It does not involve letters or print. Key skills include rhyming, blending sounds, segmenting sounds, adding / deleting sounds. Think ears, not eyes. Why B is correct. B. Having students say the word airplane and then say it again without air. This activity asks students to listen to a spoken word, remove part of the word, a syllable / onset. That is a classic phonological awareness task called phoneme / syllable deletion. White heavy check mark. It is oral. White heavy check mark. No letters involved. White heavy check mark. Students manipulate spoken sounds. That perfectly matches the goal of guided practice in phonological awareness. Why the other options are wrong. A. Following a finger while the teacher reads. This teaches print concepts, directionality of text, not sound manipulation. C. Using plastic letters to form words. This is phonics, connecting sounds to letters, not pure sound work. D. Cutting name cards into letters. This focuses on letter recognition and word building, which is also phonics, not phonological awareness. Praxis memory trick to spot phonological awareness questions. White heavy check mark. Oral only activities. White heavy check mark. No letters. White heavy check mark. Students manipulate sounds if letters or print are involved. Right arrow. It's not phonological awareness. Flashcard 3. A first-grade teacher selects a picture book that retells the well-known fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears to read aloud to the class. Following the first oral reading of the text, the teacher distributes a graphic organizer with a set of questions for students to answer as the text is read again. During the second reading, the teacher pauses at different parts of the story and asks students to independently answer. A portion of the graphic organizer the teacher uses is shown below. Question / the story says / I say / and so I believe the teacher's instructional method best engages students in which of the following thinking processes related to successful reading comprehension? A. Making decisions about what is going to happen next. B. Determining what is important in a story. C. Searching a story to reach a conclusion. D. Creating mental images of the events. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Searching a story to reach a conclusion based on clues an author gives and prior knowledge to construct meaning that goes beyond what is literally stated. What the graphic organizer shows the organizer. As these parts the story says right arrow I say right arrow, and so I believe this structure is a classic inferencing framework. The story says equals text evidence I say equals the reader's background knowledge / thinking, and so I believe equals the conclusion inference. This is not prediction, summarizing, or visualization, it's inference. Why C is correct. C. Searching a story to reach a conclusion based on clues an author gives and prior knowledge to construct meaning that goes beyond what is literally stated. That answer perfectly describes making inferences. White heavy checkmark. Use text clues. White heavy checkmark. Combine with prior knowledge. White heavy checkmark. Go beyond what is directly stated. That exactly matches the story says + I say equals, and so I believe model. Why the other answers are wrong. A. Making decisions about what will happen next. This describes predicting, not inferencing. B. Determining what is important and writing it in your own words. This describes summarizing or main idea, not inferencing. D. Creating mental images. This describes visualizing, not inferencing. Praxis test tip: you should remember, if you see a graphic organizer that looks like text evidence plus background knowledge right arrow conclusion, the skill is inferencing every time. Flashcard 4. A first-grade teacher works with small groups of students to teach them how to develop their writing skills. Which of the following methods best fosters the student's ability to use correct mechanics, such as punctuation and capitalization, in their own writing? A. Assigning worksheets from a workbook to complete. B. Having students copy rules in their copybooks for reference. C. Emphasizing pauses indicated by punctuation during read-alouds. D. Using mentor text to encourage imitation of effective writing. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Using mentor text to encourage imitation of effective writing. What the question is really asking, the goal is to help students use correct mechanics, capitalization, punctuation in their own writing, not just recognize rules, but actually apply them. The key phrase is in their own writing. Why D. Using mentor text is correct. Mentor texts are high-quality examples of writing that students study, notice patterns in, and then imitate in their own writing. When students see how capitals and punctuation are used in real writing and try it themselves, they are much more likely to transfer the skill into their own work. White heavy checkmark. This builds authentic application. White heavy checkmark encourages real writing practice. White heavy checkmark supports long-term skill use. Why the other choices are weaker? Worksheets. Right arrow. Practice in isolation, not authentic writing. Students often don't transfer worksheet skills into real writing. B. Copying rules. Right arrow. Memorization, not application. Students might know the rules but not use them correctly when writing. C. Emphasizing pauses during read-alouds. Right arrow helps with fluency and listening, not writing mechanics. Praxis tip to remember: when the question asks about improving students' actual writing, pick authentic writing-based strategies, not worksheets, not copying rules. Mentor text use equals best practice answer. Flashcard 5. Which of the following phonemic manipulations is the most complex and is generally developed last by most students? A. Change the /m/in mouse to /h/at/b. Say frame. Say it again without the /r/at c. What word is made when BL and UM are combined? D. Say donut. Now say it again, but don't say dough. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Say frame. Say it again without the /r/. What the test is assessing, it's asking which phonemic manipulation skill is the most complex and usually develops last. The general developmental order is a blending sounds, right arrow easiest, segmenting sounds, deleting sounds, substituting sounds, right arrow hardest, white heavy check mark. The more the student has to change sounds inside a word, the harder the task. Why B is the correct answer. B. Say frame. Say it again without the /r/. This requires hearing individual phonemes in a consonant blend /f//r//a macron /m/ deleting one sound inside the word, not at the beginning or end, maintaining the remaining sounds correctly. This is one of the most cognitively complex phonemic manipulation tasks. White heavy check mark. It involves phoneme level work, not syllables. White heavy check mark. It requires internal deletion. White heavy check mark. It changes the structure of the word. That's why it is considered the most advanced. Why the other options are less complex. They change /m/in mouse to /h/. This is substitution, but at the initial sound, which is generally easier than manipulating sounds inside consonant blends. C. Combining BL plus this is blending, which is the earliest developing and easiest skill. D. Say donut without dough. This is syllable deletion, which is easier than deleting individual phonemes. Praxis memory trick. Hardest phonemic tasks work inside the word. Change or delete sounds often involve blends. Easiest tasks rhyming. White heavy check mark. Blending. White heavy check mark. Syllable work. White heavy check mark. Flashcard 6. A third-grade teacher's reading instruction includes sources from multiple content areas. During a science lesson, students are reading a trade book about plants. The book contains many new and difficult vocabulary words, such as chlorophyll, germinate, and photosynthesis. Which of the following teaching activities will best help the students develop an understanding of the new words? A. Making lists of words from the science book to post on a word wall in the classroom. B. Planning direct instruction using multimedia methods to introduce words in rich contexts. C. Having students assume definitions for the new words and relate them to words they already know. D. Giving these students Venn diagrams to sort the new vocabulary into well-defined categories. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Planning direct instruction using multimedia methods to introduce the words in rich contexts. What the question is really about, this is a content area vocabulary question. The words given: chlorophyll, germinate, photosynthesis are white heavy check mark, technical white heavy check mark, academic white heavy check mark, unfamiliar to most third graders white heavy check mark, not easily learned just from context. These types of words require explicit, systematic instruction. Why B is the best answer. B. Planning direct instruction using multimedia methods to introduce words in rich contexts. This is best because it provides explicit teaching, not guessing. Uses visuals, videos, diagrams. Right arrow. Great for science terms. Places words in meaningful, connected contexts. Students understand complex science vocabulary best when they see, hear, and connect the words to real examples. That's exactly what research-based literacy instruction recommends. Why the other choices are weaker. A. Word wall only. Right arrow displays words but doesn't ensure understanding. C. Having students assume definitions. Right arrow guessing meanings of technical science words can lead to misconceptions. D. Sorting with Venn diagrams. Right arrow categorizing helps after students already know the meanings, not at the initial learning stage. Praxis memory tip: when you see technical content area words, students who are unfamiliar with them, the best answer is almost always a right explicit, rich, multi-sensory instruction. Flashcard 7. A kindergarten teacher assesses students' understanding of concepts of print at the beginning of the year. The results of one student's assessment are shown. Concepts of print assessment. Can you point to the front cover of the book? September, yes, May, can you point to the picture at the top of the book? September, yes, May, can you show me one letter? September, yes, May, can you show me where to read after this word? September, no, May, based on the data, which of the following instructional methods will best promote the student's understanding of print conventions? A. Teaching letter-sound relationships explicitly and in isolation. B. Activating the student's background knowledge of concepts that are important to the content of the text. C. Using a finger to draw attention to letters and words in the text during a shared reading. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Using a finger to draw attention to letters and words in the text during a shared reading. What the assessment tells us: the student can already white heavy check mark identify the front cover, white heavy check mark point to a picture, white heavy check mark show a single letter, but the student cannot cross mark show where to read next after a word. This skill is about print directionality and tracking text, which is a key concept of print. Why C is the correct answer. C. Using a finger to draw attention to letters and words in the text during a shared reading. This is called finger-point tracking during shared reading. It helps students see left to right directionality, learn word spacing, understand where reading continues after a word. White heavy check mark directly targets the student's gap. White heavy check mark teaches print conventions in context. White heavy check mark matches the exact skill they are missing. Why the other options are incorrect. Teaching letter-sound relationships. This is phonics, not print concepts. B. Activating background knowledge. This is a comprehension strategy, not about tracking print. Praxis test tip: if a student struggles with where do I read next? Direction of text tracking words. The best answer is right shared reading with finger pointing. Flashart 8. Place the following oral language milestones in the order in which they are developed, earliest to latest. A. Responding to simple questions with a yes or no. B. Making an oral presentation that is appropriate for the given audience. C. Answering questions using complete sentences and a variety of sentence structures. D. Using content-related vocabulary correctly during conversations. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Responding to simple questions with a yes or no. What the question is really asking: it's asking about the developmental progression of oral language skills from the simplest to the most advanced. You don't need exact ages. You just need to think of right short, basic responses come before complex language use. Why 8 is the earliest milestone. A. Responding to simple questions with yes or no is the most basic skill because it white heavy check mark requires minimal vocabulary. White heavy check mark uses one-word responses. White heavy check mark doesn't require sentence structure. This type of response appears much earlier in development than full sentences, presentations, or academic vocabulary. That's why it is correct as the earliest milestone. How the full developmental order works for your understanding: from earliest right arrow latest. The progression generally looks like a white heavy check mark yes/no responses, a simplest form of communication, complete sentences with varied structures. C. Using content-related vocabulary and conversation. D. Formal oral presentations for an audience. B. Most advanced praxis shortcut strategy when ordering oral language milestones: one-word responses equals earliest academic language plus formal situations equals latest. Flashart 9. MS. Jones introduces visualizing as a comprehension skill to her first-grade students using a short passage of text. Which of the following strategies illustrates how to best introduce the skill? A. Allowing the students to read the passage independently and draw an illustration to match it. B. Assigning partners to illustrate the passage that is read aloud by the teacher. C. Demonstrating how to summarize the passage using a story map with pictures. D. Explaining the process in detail and modeling it by thinking aloud while reading the passage. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Explaining the process in detail and modeling it by thinking aloud while reading the passage. What the question is really asking: the key phrases best introduce the skill. This means the students have not learned visualizing yet. The teacher is teaching it for the first time. When introducing a new reading strategy, the best practice is a write explicit explanation plus teacher modeling why D is correct. D. Explaining the process in detail and modeling it by thinking aloud while reading the passage. This uses think aloud modeling, which is the gold standard for introducing comprehension strategies. It shows students what the strategy is, how a good reader uses it, what's happening inside the reader's mind. White heavy check mark. Direct instruction. White heavy check mark. Clear modeling. White heavy check mark makes the thinking visible, perfect for first read and first time instruction. Why the other choices are weaker. A. Students read independently and draw right arrow. That's practice, not introduction. B. Partners illustrate right arrow. Collaborative, but still practice rather than explicit teaching. C. Summarizing with a story map. Right arrow. That's teaching summarization, not visualizing. Praxis shortcut tip. If a question says introduce a strategy first time, the correct answer is almost always right. Teacher modeling using think alouds. Flashcard 10. A kindergarten teacher sets a benchmark goal for students to quickly recognize a set of 10 new sight words within a 3-week instructional time period. The teacher introduces the words by using flashcards and engages students in a series of activities that reinforce learning within authentic contexts. During this time, the teacher also creates a small group workshop activity in which students view each word printed in large letters on a card, say the word, and then use pipe cleaners to form the word. Which of the following is the primary benefit to students of participating in the workshop activity? A. Improving long-term memory of a non-decodable word by engaging multiple student senses in learning. B. Building a student's reading fluency by improving the ability to flexibly apply phonological awareness skills. C. Increasing a student's ability to use several sensory modalities to phonetically decode and recognize. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Improving long-term memory of a non-decodable word by engaging multiple student senses in learning what the question is really about. The focus is on sight words. These are high-frequency words, often non-decodable, can't always be sounded out, normally must be memorized for automatic recognition. The activity described uses seeing the word, large printed cards saying the word, oral practice, touching/forming the word by cleaners kinesthetic. That makes this a multisensory learning activity. Why is correct? A. Improving long-term memory of a non-decodable word by engaging multiple student senses in learning. This answer matches exactly what the activity does. White heavy check mark works with sight visual. White heavy check mark speech auditory. White heavy check mark touch/movement kinesthetic. Multisensory practice helps anchor hard to decode sight words into long-term memory. That's the primary benefit. Why the other options are wrong. B. Building fluency through phonological awareness. Right arrow. Sight words are not about phonological awareness. They are stored by memory. C. Phonetic decoding using multiple senses. Right arrow. These are non-decodable words, so decoding doesn't apply here. Praxis test shortcut. When you see a sight words, type cleaners/sand/ski writing/tracing multi-step sensory actions. The correct concept is almost always a right multisensory memory for automatic word recognition. Flashcard 11. Which of the following statements about the correlation between phonemic awareness and reading development is best supported by research? A. Students' reading skills advance as students develop greater phonemic awareness. B. Weak phonemic awareness has virtually no impact on reading skills after the 3rd grade. C. Students with weak phonemic awareness often acquire strong decoding skills to compensate. D. Poor reading skills in the later grades are solely the result of weak phonemic awareness in the early grades. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Students' reading skills advance as students develop greater phonemic awareness. What this question is really asking is about the research-based relationship between phonemic awareness and reading development. Phonemic awareness equals the ability to hear and manipulate individual sounds, phonemes in spoken words. Research shows this is one of the strongest early predictors of successful reading. Why is correct? A. Students' reading skills advance as students develop greater phonemic awareness. This statement matches decades of reading research. White heavy check mark, strong phonemic awareness, right arrow, easier decoding, white heavy check mark, better decoding, right arrow, better reading accuracy, white heavy check mark, better accuracy, right arrow, stronger overall reading development. Phonemic awareness is considered a foundational skill for reading. Why the other answers are wrong. B. Weak phonemic awareness has virtually no impact after third grade. Cross mark, false. Students with weak early phonemic skills often continue to struggle with decoding and spelling, even in later grades. C. Students with weak phonemic awareness often acquire strong decoding skills to compensate. Cross mark, unrealistic. You can't compensate for weak sound awareness and still decode effectively. D. Poor reading in later grades is solely the result of weak phonemic awareness. Cross mark, too extreme. Reading difficulties are multifactorial. Vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, background knowledge also matter. Praxis memory trick. If you see, best supported by research, phonemic awareness plus reading the safest. Research-aligned answer is right. Stronger phonemic awareness equals stronger reading skills. Flashcard 12. A teacher scores student writing samples using criteria that define expectations for different levels of proficiency. Which of the following tools is the teacher most likely using? A. Anecdotal notes. B. Checklist. C. Scoring guide. D. Rubric. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Rubric. Key phrase in the question. The most important words are criteria that define expectations for different levels of proficiency. That wording is a textbook definition of a rubric. Why rubric is the correct answer? A rubric lists criteria what is being judged, describes levels of performance, for example beginning, developing, proficient, advanced, explains what each level looks like. That's exactly what the teacher is using in this scenario. Why the other options are wrong? A. Anecdotal notes, right arrow, informal teacher observations, not leveled criteria. B. Checklist, right arrow, simple yes/no or present/absent items, not proficiency levels. C. Scoring guide, right arrow, this is a vague term and not the best answer when rubric is an option. Praxis shortcut. If you see levels of proficiency, performance levels, criteria for each level, the answer is almost always a right. Rubric. Flashcard 13. A first-grade teacher notices during guided reading that a student has difficulty decoding words such as ran, pet, and hot. Which of the following is the most appropriate way for the teacher to confirm these students' difficulty? A. Administering a phonemic awareness assessment in which the student breaks spoken words into individual phonemes. B. Choosing an appropriate passage for the student to read aloud, and noting how many words the student can read in 1 minute. C. Checking for understanding by asking explicit questions after the student has completed reading a grade-level passage. D. Presenting a list of grade-level high-frequency words for the student to read aloud. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Administering a phonemic awareness assessment in which the student breaks spoken words into individual phonemes. Step 1. Identify the student's problem. The student struggles with simple words like ran, pet, him, hot. These are white heavy check mark, short white heavy check mark, regular decodable white heavy check mark, CVC words, since these are easy phonics-based words. The issue is likely not sight words or comprehension. The underlying problem is typically phonemic awareness, hearing and manipulating individual sounds. Step 2. Why is the correct answer A. Administering a phonemic awareness assessment where the student breaks spoken words into phonemes. This is the best way to confirm the root cause of the decoding difficulty. If a student can't hear the individual sounds in words, then they can't map sounds to letters when decoding. White heavy checkmark. This directly assesses the foundation skill behind decoding. Step 3. Why the other options are wrong. B. 1 minute oral reading. Right arrow measures fluency, not the cause of decoding errors. C. Asking comprehension questions. Right arrow tests understanding, not decoding ability. D. High-frequency word list. Right arrow tests sight word recognition, not phonemic decoding. Praxis test trick. If a question shows struggling with simple, regular words and asks how to confirm the difficulty, the best answer is a right phonemic awareness assessment. Flashcard 14. In order to develop students' spelling skills, a teacher presents the following words to the class. Chinsha, draw rash. Which of the following strategies best utilizes a multisensory and recursive approach to teaching the spelling of these words? A. Chanting a poem with the digraph sounds found in the words. B. Using letter tiles to build previously learned CVC words along with the new words. C. Completing a worksheet that matches pictures with the correct digraphs in the words. D. Writing each new word in similar CVC words multiple times. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Using letter tiles to build previously learned CVC words along with the new words. What the question is really about, the key phrase, is a multisensory and recursive approach. Let's break that down. The multisensory equals seeing, touching, hearing. Moving. Recursive equals revisiting and building on previously learned skills. Why B is correct. B. Using letter tiles to build previously learned CVC words along with the new words. This activity, white heavy checkmark, uses touch. Manipulating tiles, white heavy checkmark, uses sight. Seeing letters, white heavy checkmark, often includes speaking sounds aloud. White heavy checkmark revisits old words while adding new ones. Right arrow, that's the recursive part. It's hands-on, visual, auditory, and builds from known to new, exactly what the question asks for. Why the other options are weaker. A. Chanting a poem, right arrow, auditory only, not truly multisensory or recursive. C. Worksheet matching, right arrow, paper only, limited sensory engagement. D. Writing words repeatedly, right arrow, repetitive, but not multisensory and doesn't intentionally build from known to new. Praxis test shortcut. When you see multisensory, white heavy checkmark, recursive, white heavy checkmark, the best answer is usually right. Manipulatives plus old skills plus new skills, which is exactly option B. Flashcard 15. A primary purpose of a criterion referenced reading benchmark is to A. Identify a student's level of mastery of a curriculum-based skill as beginning, developing, or proficient. B. Compare a student's mastery of a specific skill to that of peers who have previously taken the same assessment. C. Evaluate student skill mastery by reporting performance with raw scores, percentile ranking, and grade equivalence. D. Set the standards for student skill mastery along with a time frame indicating when the level of mastery should be achieved. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Set the standards for student skill mastery along with a time frame indication when the level of mastery should be achieved. What criterion referenced really means. A criterion referenced assessment compares a student's performance to a fixed standard, not to other students. Think white heavy check mark, did you meet the standard? Cross mark, not how did you do compared to others. What a benchmark is a target goal set for a specific time period, middle of year, end of year, etc. So a reading benchmark answers what should students be able to do by a certain time. Why D is the correct answer. D. Set the standards for student skill mastery along with a time frame indicating when the level of mastery should be achieved. This perfectly describes a criterion referenced benchmark. White heavy check mark has a standard what students should know / do. White heavy check mark has a time frame by when they should reach it. That's exactly the purpose of these benchmarks. Why the other answers are wrong. A. Beginning / developing / proficient, right arrow, that describes a rubric, not a benchmark. Purpose. B. Compare to peers, right arrow, that's norm referenced, not criterion referenced. C. Percentiles and grade equivalence, right arrow, also norm referenced and statistical. Praxis memory trick. If you see criterion referenced, right arrow, think standards. Benchmark, right arrow, think timeline. Together equals right what students should meet by when. Flashcard 16. A second grade teacher reviewed data from the mid-year literacy screening and compared them to the data from the beginning of the year literacy screening. The data revealed that the students who were grade level readers at the beginning of the year showed very little growth in reading comprehension, and 2/3 of the emergent readers were ready to be placed with the grade level readers. Which of the following strategies will best help accelerate the growth of the grade level readers? A. Playing recordings of interesting stories that are above the student's reading level and discussing character development, plot, and theme. B. Using guided reading groups to assign students texts at their independent reading level and asking them to complete comprehension questions. C. Telling students to practice silent reading with texts at their instructional level and requiring them to journal about setting, conflict, and resolute. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Playing recordings of interesting stories that are above the student's reading level and discussing character development, plot, and theme. What the question is really asking the students who were already grade-level readers. White heavy check mark started strong, cross mark showed little growth and comprehension. The goal now is to accelerate their growth, not just maintain it. Why is the correct answer A? Playing recordings of interesting stories that are above the student's reading level and discussing character, plot, and theme. This uses a strategy called listening comprehension with complex text. Why it's powerful: students can understand more complex language when they don't have to decode it themselves. It exposes them to high-level vocabulary. It allows practice with deeper comprehension skills. This pushes their thinking beyond grade-level texts, exactly what strong readers need. Why the other options are weaker. B. Independent level texts with questions. Right arrow too easy. Does not stretch their comprehension. C. Instructional level silent reading and journaling. Right arrow better, but still limited by what students can independently decode. These options don't accelerate learning the way listening to high-level text does. Praxis test a shortcut when you see strong readers. White heavy check mark little growth. White heavy check mark need to accelerate comprehension. The right answer is usually about right access to more complex texts, often through read alouds or audio. Flashcard 17. 4th grade students are researching animals using informational texts. They complete the inquiry chart I chart below to record what they find in various texts. Question 1: Where do elephants live? What do we already know? In Africa. Source 1: African elephants live in the savannah. Some elephants live in forests. Source 2: African. Southeast Asia and South Asia. Source 3: Elephants like to live near water. Question 2: What do elephants eat? What do we already know? Grass and plants using their trunks. Which of the following is the most important pedagogical reason for having students complete an eye charter? It enables students to evaluate the reliability of expository text. B. It encourages students to build on their prior knowledge of a topic. C. It supports students' understanding of content vocabulary. D. It promotes students' understanding of expository text features. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. It encourages students to build on their prior knowledge of a topic. What an eye chart inquiry chart does. An eye chart is designed to help students activate what they already know, record new information from multiple sources, compare and build their understanding over time. Notice the chart. The question includes what do we already know. This is the biggest clue. Why B is correct. B. It encourages students to build on their prior knowledge of a topic. The eye chart explicitly starts with students writing down what they already know. Each new source then adds to or refines that knowledge. White heavy check mark activates background knowledge. White heavy check mark connects old learning to new learning. White heavy check mark builds a deeper understanding. This is the primary instructional purpose of the eye chart. Why the other answers are less accurate. A. Evaluate reliability of text. Right arrow that would involve source credibility checks, which the chart is not showing. C. Content vocabulary support. Right arrow helpful side effect, but not the main purpose. D. Understanding expository text features. Right arrow that focuses on structure, headings, captions, diagrams, which is not what the chart emphasizes. Praxis tip: anytime you see what do we already know. Recording learning across sources. Think right, building on prior knowledge. Flashcard 18. A 4th grade teacher works with a small group of students who decode well but demonstrate poor comprehension. Through various informal assessments, the teacher determines that the students do not effectively apply knowledge of prefixes, suffixes, roots, and bases when words change form, and therefore students often lack understanding of academic text. Which 3 of the following activities best help students improve morphological analysis for better reading comprehension? A. Combining word parts written on cards to form new words. B. Making lists of words with similar affixes in a vocabulary notebook. C. Completing a clause by using a bank of word parts to fill in blanks in sentences. D. Examining word affixes and roots on semantic map posters. E. Studying words with common bases and roots for a spelling quiz. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Combining word parts written on cards to form new words. C. Completing a clause by using a bank of word parts to fill in blanks in sentences. D. Examining word affixes and roots on semantic map posters. What skill is being targeted? The students decode well. White heavy check mark. Struggle with comprehension. Cross mark. Don't understand how word parts change meaning. This means the missing skill is morphological analysis. Morphological analysis equals understanding prefixes pre-suffixes full, less, on roots / base words bio, struct, craft. The goal is to help students analyze word structure to unlock meaning. Why the correct answers work. White heavy check mark. A. Combining word parts written on cards to form new words. This is excellent because students physically manipulate prefixes, roots, and suffixes. See how meanings change when parts are combined. Right arrow. Direct practice in word construction. White heavy check mark. C. Completing a clause with a bank of word parts. This helps students use meaning plus word structure to correctly build words in context. See how morphology affects sentence meaning. Right arrow. Strong connection between word parts and comprehension. White heavy check mark. D. Examining word affixes and roots on semantic map posters. Semantic maps help students visually organize relationships among word parts. Attach meaning to roots and affixes. Right arrow. Great for deeper understanding and retention. Y, B, and E are not correct. Cross mark. B. Making lists of words with similar affixes. This is mostly copying and listing, not true analysis or application. Cross mark. E. Studying words for a spelling quiz. This focuses on memorization and spelling, not meaning or comprehension. Praxis shortcut to remember. Good morphological instruction includes a white heavy check mark. Building words. White heavy check mark. Breaking words apart. White heavy check mark. Using them in context. White heavy check mark. Visual meaning maps. Avoid answers that focus only on cross mark. Copying. Cross mark. Memorizing. Cross mark. Spelling tests. Flashcard 19. Matching. Stage 1 Emergent Spelling. Stage 2 Latin name alphabetic spelling. Stage 3 Within word patterns spelling. Stage 4 Syllables and affixes spelling. A. Using inflectional endings, changing spellings when needed. B. Writing words with long vowel patterns and R-controlled vowels. C. Writing the beginning and ending consonant sounds of words. D. Drawing random capital or lowercase letters, numbers, or other symbols. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is Stage 1D. Drawing random capital or lowercase letters, numbers, or other symbols. Stage 2C. Writing the beginning and ending consonant sounds. Stage 3B. Writing words with long vowel patterns and R-controlled vowels. Stage 4A. Using inflectional endings, changing spellings when needed. Why each one matches. Stage 1 Emergent. Right arrow. D. Students don't yet connect letters to sounds. They scribble or write random symbols. Stage 2 Let name alphabetic. Right arrow. C. Students start connecting sounds to letters, usually writing only the first and last consonants, e.g. CT for cat. Stage 3 Within word pattern. Right arrow. B. Students learn vowel patterns. Long vowels are controlled like car, bird. Stage 4 Syllables and affixes. Right arrow. A. Students correctly use ed, ing, s doubling consonants. For example, hopping. Praxis memory trick. Think of the stages like this. Random right arrow sounds, right arrow vowels, right arrow endings. That pattern will help you quickly match these on test day. Flashcard 20. A second grade teacher guides students in using Elkin boxes to write letters in boxes under pictures. Which of the following phonics concepts does the strategy best reinforce in the example shown? VOETSOPRODA. Vowel digraphs. B. Far sound. C. Short vowels. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Vowel digraph step 1. Look at the example. The teacher shows words in Elkin in boxes BOT right arrow boat SORP right arrow soap ROD right arrow road. Notice the common pattern OR in the middle of each word. Step 2. Identify the phonics concept. OR is a vowel digraph right arrow, two letters that make one vowel sound / omicron / This is a classic phonics skill for early readers. YA. Vowel digraphs is correct. Elkin in boxes separate sounds phonemes, and students map letters to sounds. Focusing on OR reinforces the concept of two letters making one vowel sound. Why the other options are wrong. B. Schwa sounds right arrow the unstressed /schwa / sound, usually in unaccented syllables, for example sofer. Not relevant here. C. Short vowels right arrow vowels pronounced with the short sound e.g. /a/ in cat. OR is a long vowel sound, so this is incorrect. Praxis memory tip: when you see two vowels together making one long vowel sound, the answer is almost always right vowel digraphs. Flashcard 21. A kindergarten teacher uses bright-colored chalk to write individual letters on sheets of black construction paper. Students take turns pointing a flashlight at and naming the letter on each sheet. Which of the following instructional objectives does the activity target? A. Improving phonological awareness skills. B. Building understanding that words are made by sequencing letters. C. Supporting learning of the alphabetic principle. D. Reinforcing knowledge of using phonics as a decoding strategy. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Supporting learning of the alphabetic principle. Step 1. Analyze the activity. The teacher has students see individual letters, name them aloud, use a flashlight to highlight letters. This is clearly letter-focused, not word level or text level. Step 2. Identify the instructional goals. C. Supporting learning of the alphabetic principle. The alphabetic principle equals understanding that letters represent sounds in spoken words. This activity helps students recognize letters and connect the letter symbol to its name / sound, which is foundational for reading. Why the other options are wrong. A. Improving phonological awareness. Right arrow phonological awareness is about hearing / manipulating sounds, not recognizing letters. B. Building understanding that words are made by sequencing letters. Right arrow that's about word-level letter sequencing, which is not the focus here. D. Reinforcing knowledge of phonics as a decoding strategy. Right arrow phonics involves applying letter sound knowledge to read words, which is beyond just naming letters. Praxis memory tip: if students are learning letters and linking them to sounds, the goal is almost always a right alphabetic principle. Flashcard 22. Which of the following should a teacher do to best help students who are revising their own writing? A. Give the students a mini lesson on how to identify errors in subject-verb agreement. B. Identify grammatical errors in the student's writing that need correction. C. Recommend that students elaborate and use words to make images more specific. D. Require students to use dependent clauses to make simple sentences more elaborate. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Recommend that students elaborate and use words to make images more specific. Step 1. Look at the focus of the question. The question asks about helping students who are revising their own writing. Key idea: revision equals improving content clarity and ideas, not just fixing grammar or mechanics. Why C is correct. C. Recommend that students elaborate and use words to make images more specific. Revision is about strengthening meaning and impact. Encouraging students to add detail, clarify ideas, or create vivid images directly targets content and quality of writing. This is exactly what revision focuses on: improving the writing itself. Why the other options are less appropriate. A. Mini lesson on subject-verb agreement. Right arrow focuses on grammar, which is editing, not revision. B. Identify grammatical errors for students. Right arrow teacher-driven correction is editing, not student-driven revision. D. Require use of dependent clauses. Right arrow imposes a specific grammatical structure, which is more editing-focused and not aligned with genuine revision choices. Praxis tip: revision approximately content improvement, editing approximately grammar, spelling, mechanics. If the question asks about revision, always pick the answer that focuses on ideas, elaboration, clarity, not rules. Flashcard 23. Mr. Cros's fourth grade students are having difficulty answering text-dependent comprehension questions. He plans to use the question-answer relationship CARC-R strategy to help students comprehend the types of questions being asked. The CARC-R strategy supports students in distinguishing between textually explicit and textually implicit questions. B. Identifying the text structure presented in the questions asked. C. Determining whether the question requires an answer or is hypothetical. D. Using words directly from the question to formulate a complete response. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is a distinguishing between textually explicit and textually implicit questions. Step 1. What the QAR strategy does. Question-answer relationship. QAR helps students understand the type of question they are being asked and where to find the answer. Before QAR types write their right arrow answers directly in the text. Explicit think and search right arrow answers in the text, but spread across sentences. Author and you right arrow answer requires combining text plus your knowledge. Implicit on your own right arrow answer comes entirely from background knowledge. Step 2. Why is correct. A. Distinguishing between textually explicit and textually implicit questions. QAR teaches students to identify whether answers are in the text explicit or require inference implicit. This directly helps with text-dependent comprehension. Why the other options are wrong. B. Identifying text structure. Right arrow. QAR does not focus on text structures. Cause/effect. Problem/solution. C. Determining if the question is answerable or hypothetical. Right arrow. Not a QAR focus. D. Using words from the question to answer. Right arrow. This may help with phrasing, but it's not the primary goal of QAR. Praxis tip. If a question mentions QAR and text-dependent comprehension, right think explicit versus implicit answers in the text. Flashcard 24. The teacher states, I look for parts of the word I know. By using this technique, the teacher provides instruction that focuses primarily on a phonics. B. Knowledge of cognates. C. Etymology. D. Structural analysis. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Structural analysis. Step 1. Analyze the statement. The teacher says, I look for parts of the word I know. This indicates students are being taught to break words into meaningful components such as a prefixes on, resuffixes full, on root/base words. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. This is called structural analysis. Structural analysis equals understanding words by analyzing their parts to determine meaning. It helps students decode and comprehend multisyllabic or complex words. Why the other options are wrong. A. Phonics. Right arrow focuses on sound-letter relationships, not meaning of word parts. B. Knowledge of cognates. Right arrow applies to words shared between languages, for example animal in English/Spanish, not general word parts. C. Etymology. Right arrow study of word origins/history, which is deeper than what students are doing here. Praxis memory tip. If students are taught to look at prefixes, suffixes, and roots to figure out word meaning, right, that's structural analysis. Flashcard 25. After presenting a group writing assignment to students, a third-grade teacher plans to introduce technology to foster group collaboration. Which of the following uses of technology would best help the teacher meet this goal? A. Having the students take turns at a computer station. B. Employing an online document sharing service. C. Setting up a group chat on a social media platform. D. Utilizing an online bulletin board. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Employing an online document sharing service. Step 1. Identify the goal. The teacher wants to foster group collaboration during a writing assignment. Key points: students need to work together, they need to share and co-create writing. Step 2. Why B is correct. B. Employing an online document sharing service. Examples of Google Docs, Microsoft OneDrive, Seesaw. Students can simultaneously edit, comment, and review each other's work. Supports real-time collaboration and joint writing. White heavy checkmark directly aligns with the instructional goal. Why the other options are weaker. A. Taking turns at a computer station, right arrow, only one student works at a time. Collaboration is limited. C. Group chat on social media, right arrow, communication is possible, but doesn't support joint writing effectively. D. Online bulletin board, right arrow, good for sharing ideas, but less interactive for co-writing. Praxis memory tip: if the question mentions a group writing plus technology plus collaboration, right, think online share documents. Flashcard 26. Ms. Dorsey, a second-grade teacher, begins a lesson by reviewing the story grammar of conventional short fiction. She reminds students that most stories have a beginning that includes information about the setting and the main characters. Then an event introducing a goal or problem occurs, followed by a series of events in which the characters attempt to solve the problem. At the end of the story, the goal or problem is finally resolved. Which of the following best explains the teacher's rationale for instructing students in recognizing story grammar in fictional texts? A. To provide a framework that helps students to comprehend and retain story information. B. To improve skill in noticing how character traits change over the course of a story. C. To support interest and motivation to engage in wide, independent reading activities. D. To use the understanding of repetition in fictional plot development to write an oric. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. To provide a framework that helps students TP comprehend and retain story information. Step 1. Understand what the teacher is doing. Ms. Dorsey reviews story grammar, which includes setting and characters, goal/problem, events, and attempts to solve the problem resolution. This is a framework for understanding story structure. Step 2. Identify the instructional rationale. A. To provide a framework that helps students to comprehend and retain story information. Teaching story grammar gives students a mental template for organizing story events. It helps them remember key details and understand how events connect. This is a comprehension strategy, not a writing or motivation strategy. Why the other options are less appropriate. B. Noticing character trait changes. Right arrow focuses narrowly on character analysis, not overall comprehension. C. Supporting interest/motivation. Right arrow motivation may be a side effect, but it is not the main instructional rationale. D. Using repetition to write an original story. Right arrow story grammar is about reading comprehension, not specifically about writing. Praxis memory tip: when you see a story elements explicitly listed, beginning, middle, end, problem, resolution, the goal is almost always of right comprehension and retention via story framework. Flashcard 27. A kindergarten teacher is helping students develop concepts about print. The teacher can best achieve the goal by using which of the following approaches? A. Helping students understand that a new word is formed when adding certain sounds to the beginning of a familiar word. B. Having students identify a missing word in a familiar text when only one vowel in the word is provided. C. Asking students questions about the number of words in a sentence and where a sentence begins and ends in a paragraph. D. Creating word family charts so that students can see that words look alike when their endings sound alike. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Asking students questions about the number of words in a sentence and where a sentence begins and ends in a paragraph. Step 1. Understand the goal. The teacher wants to develop concepts about print. Concepts about print include understanding that print carries meaning, recognizing word boundaries, knowing where sentences start and end, understanding that text is read left to right, top to bottom. Step 2. Why C is correct. C. Asking students questions about the number of words in a sentence and where a sentence begins and ends in a paragraph directly teaches word and sentence boundaries, which are key concepts about print. Support students in tracking and organizing print, an essential early literacy skill. Why the other options are incorrect. Adding sounds to the beginning of words. Right arrow focuses on phonemic awareness, not concepts about print. B. Identifying missing words with one vowel. Right arrow focuses on decoding or word recognition, not print conventions. D. Creating word family charts. Right arrow focuses on phonics patterns, not the structure of print itself. Praxis memory tip concepts about print equals how print works, not sounds or word patterns. Think of words, sentences, spaces, reading direction, right arrow. That's your clue for concepts about print. Flashcard 28. Which of the following strategies is most likely to be effective in motivating elementary students to read independently in school? A. Reminding students that reading is crucial to being successful in the future. B. Providing extrinsic rewards such as free time when students read more. C. Allowing students to choose texts about topics that interest them. D. Engaging students in critical thinking activities during guided reading. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Allowing students to choose texts about topics that interest them. Step 1. Analyze the goal. The question asks about motivating elementary students to read independently. Key points of motivation equals desire to read. Independent reading equals student-driven, not teacher-driven. Step 2. Why C is correct. C. Allowing students to choose texts about topics that interest them. Choice increases engagement and intrinsic motivation. Students are more likely to read voluntarily if they care about the topic. Supports lifelong reading habits, not just short-term compliance. Why the other options are weaker. Reminding students reading is crucial for future success. Right arrow. 2. Abstract, for young students, does not create immediate motivation. B. Providing extrinsic rewards. Right arrow. Works short-term but can undermine intrinsic motivation and enjoyment of reading. D. Engaging in critical thinking during guided reading. Right arrow. Important for comprehension but does not directly motivate independent reading. Praxis tip. When the question is about motivating independent reading, look for student choice and personal interest. Right arrow. Intrinsic motivation. Avoid answers that focus on rewards or abstract future benefits. Flashcard 29. A teacher has students read the following passage during a science lesson. The teacher then refers to the same passage during the reading block to demonstrate the structure of certain forms of informational text. Not all stars are the same, and it is important to understand their properties. There are 5 parameters of stars that we can measure. Luminosity is the measure of how much energy is emitted by the star. Stars also have their own size and temperature. The mass of stars can be measured, and we can also determine their composition. The passage best demonstrates which of the following text structures? A. Generalization. B. Sequence. C. Enumeration. D. Classification. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Enumeration. Step 1. Analyze the passage. Key features of the passage. Topic. Properties of stars. The text lists 5 parameters: luminosity, size, temperature, mass, composition. Notice how the passage lists items one after another rather than describing steps, types, or causes. Step 2. Identify the text structure. Enumeration equals listing items, facts, or parameters. The passage lists multiple properties of stars in a structured way. No sequence order of steps, classification, categories, or generalization. Broad statements supported by details is the main focus. Why the other options are wrong. A. Generalization. Right arrow would be a broad statement like all stars have certain measurable properties, with supporting evidence, not the focus here. B. Sequence. Right arrow would describe steps in order. A.g. first, then, next. D. Classification. Right arrow would organize items into categories or types, which isn't what this passage does. It just lists properties. Praxis shortcut. If a passage lists facts, items, or characteristics, uses phrases like there are, the following, or numbers, right, the structure is almost always enumeration. Flashcard 30. A teacher focuses on the following skills while working with a group of students: clarifying a purpose for reading, previewing a text before reading, monitoring understanding by adjusting reading speed, checking for understanding after reading a text. The teacher is primarily developing students' ability to A. Draw conclusions from information or clues they find in a text. B. Use metacognitive strategies to think about and have control over their reading. C. Activate background knowledge to help them understand what they are reading. D. Synthesize information in a text to explain what the text is about. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Use metacognitive strategies to think about and have control over their reading. Step 1. Analyze the skills being taught. The teacher focuses on clarifying a purpose, right arrow, deciding why to read, previewing a text, right arrow, planning how to read, monitoring, understanding, right arrow, checking comprehension while reading, checking for understanding, right arrow, reflecting on comprehension after reading. Notice the common theme of students thinking about and controlling their own reading process. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. B. Use metacognitive strategies to think about and have control over their reading. Metacognition equals thinking about. Thinking students are learning to plan, monitor, and evaluate their reading. This improves comprehension and independent reading skills while the other options are less accurate. Draw conclusions. Right arrow focuses on inferencing, not controlling reading. C. Activate background knowledge. Right arrow, important. But this is just one small part of metacognition. D. Synthesize information. Right arrow requires combining ideas, which is a higher-order comprehension skill, not the main focus here. Praxis memory tip: if the question mentions monitoring, understanding, adjusting reading strategies, reflecting on comprehension, right, think metacognitive strategies. Flashcard 31. Which of the following reading skills is the most important prerequisite to understanding an author's purpose? A. Creating mental images while reading. B. Eliminating unnecessary information. C. Distinguishing between facts and opinions. D. Making personal connections to the text. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Distinguishing between facts and opinions. Step 1. Understand the skill being targeted. The question asks about a prerequisite skill for understanding an author's purpose. Author's purpose equals the reason the author wrote the text: to inform, persuade, entertain, or explain. To understand purpose, students must be able to analyze what the author is saying and how. Step 2. Why C is correct. C. Distinguishing between facts and opinions. Facts equals verifiable statements. Opinions equals authors' beliefs, preferences, or arguments. Being able to tell fact from opinion helps students identify when the author is informing, mostly facts; identify when the author is persuading, mostly opinions. This skill is essential for understanding purpose, while the other options are less relevant. A. Creating mental images. Right arrow helps comprehension, but not directly connected to purpose. B. Eliminating unnecessary information. Right arrow useful for summarizing, but not a prerequisite for identifying purpose. D. Making personal connections. Right arrow supports engagement and understanding, but not essential for identifying purpose. Praxis tip: if a question asks about author's purpose, ask yourself, do students need to tell fact versus opinion? If yes, right arrow, that's your clue. Flashcard 32. Which of the following is the most effective strategy for building and extending students' vocabulary knowledge? A. Showing students how to use roots and affixes to determine meanings. B. Asking students to use unfamiliar words in a sentence. C. Asking students to look up the definitions of unfamiliar words to determine meanings. D. Requiring students to memorize the spelling of unfamiliar words. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Showing students how to use roots and affixes to determine meanings. Step 1. Understand the goal. The question asks for the most effective strategy for building and extending vocabulary. The key is deep understanding and transfer, not just memorization or surface-level use. Step 2. Why A is correct. A. Showing students how to use roots and affixes to determine meanings teaches students morphological analysis. Breaking words into roots, prefixes, and suffixes helps students figure out meanings of new words independently. Supports long-term vocabulary growth across contexts. Encourages word learning strategies rather than memorization. Why the other options are less effective. B. Using unfamiliar words in a sentence. Right arrow helpful practice, but doesn't teach students how to independently decode meaning. C. Looking up definitions. Right arrow passive. Students don't learn a strategy for handling new words in the future. D. Memorizing spellings. Right arrow focuses on orthography, not understanding or extending vocabulary. Praxis memory tip: if the question asks about building and extending vocabulary, look for answers that teach strategies for independent word learning. Go beyond memorization or rote practice. Right, that's your clue for roots and affixes / morphological analysis. Flashcard 33. Which of the following is the ability to recognize that words in oral language are made up of a variety of sound units? A. Alphabetic knowledge. B. Phonological awareness. C. Letter knowledge. D. Print awareness. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Phonological awareness. Flashcard 34. A preschool teacher works with a small group of students in a center and asks them to walk around the room to find and name groups of 5 objects or pictures that begin with the same sound. Students first find a bat, a ball, a box, a boat, and a bug. Then they identify a chair, a chart, a chain, a chick, and a cherry. Which of the following early literacy concepts is best supported by the instructional activity? A. Distinguishing letter-sound correspondence in printed words. B. Locating the onset and rhyme of words commonly used in Class C. Developing phonological awareness by recognizing alliteration. D. Building vocabulary based on items that are accessible in class. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Developing phonological awareness by recognizing alliteration. Step 1. Analyze the activity. Students are asked to find groups of objects / pictures that begin with the same sound. Examples: bat, ball, box, boat, bug, chair, chart, chain, chick, cherry. Notice the focus is on initial sounds in spoken words, not letters themselves. Step 2. Identify the literacy concept. C. Developing phonological awareness by recognizing alliteration. Alliteration equals repetition of the initial sound in words. This activity develops phonological awareness, the ability to notice and manipulate sounds in spoken words. It does not require reading or letters, which makes it appropriate for preschoolers, while the other options are less accurate. Letter-sound correspondence. Right arrow involves printed letters, not just listening to sounds. B. Locating onset and rhyme. Right arrow onset rhyme deals with splitting syllables, not initial sound alliteration. D. Building vocabulary. Right arrow vocabulary is a secondary effect. The primary goal is phonological awareness. Praxis tip: if a preschooler early elementary activity focuses on hearing and manipulating sounds in spoken words, right arrow think phonological awareness. If it specifically repeats initial sounds, right arrow that's alliteration. Flashcard 35-1. I like to blank. 2. I like to blank. And after that I like to blank. 3. When I blank, I like to blank. 4. My brother didn't go to blank because he blank. By guiding students to fill in the blanks, the teacher best supports student learning in which of the following areas? A. Combining 2 or more sentences. B. Expanding sentences with different parts of speech. C. Writing a variety of sentence types. D. Applying punctuation rules to simple sentences. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Writing a variety of sentence types. Step 1. Analyze the activity. Students are asked to fill in blanks in sentence starters such as I like to blank, I like to blank, and after that I like to blank. When I blank, I like to blank. My brother didn't go to blank because he blank. Notice how the sentence structures vary. Some are simple, some include compound ideas or dependent clauses. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. C. Writing a variety of sentence types. The activity exposes students to different sentence patterns, encourages students to experiment with clauses, sequencing, and cause/effect, supports writing fluency and flexibility with sentences, while the other options are less accurate. A. Combining 2 or more sentences. Right arrow only part of the skill, not the main focus. B. Expanding sentences with different parts of speech. Right arrow the blanks focus on ideas, not strictly parts of speech. D. Applying punctuation rules. Right arrow punctuation is present but not the main instructional goal. Praxis typify writing activity has sentence starters with different structures. The main focus is almost always right, exposing students to a variety of sentence types. Flashcard 36. Applying punctuation rules to simple sentences. A fourth-grade teacher uses a variety of personal narrative writing samples as models to provide instruction in the characteristics of the genre. Following the instruction and a review of steps in the writing process, the teacher assigns a project in which students are asked to write personal narrative stories. Maintaining a focus that the purpose of writing is to inform an audience about a chosen topic of inquiry. B. Having adequate background knowledge on a subject to be able to work through the writing process independently. C. Patterning personal writing pieces on ideas in exemplary texts that show varied linguistic structures to make writing interesting. D. Being flexible and moving recursively through the stages of the writing process to best meet targeted goals. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Being flexible and moving recursively through the stages of the writing process to best meet targeted goals. Step 1. Analyze Jennifer's actions. Jennifer uses a story map organizer to plan her narrative per writing. Writes a draft using the organizer, reads and revises her draft, considering her audience, returns to the graphic organizer to add more vivid language. Notice she moves back and forth between stages of the writing process instead of following them in a strict linear order. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. D. Being flexible and moving recursively through the stages of the writing process to best meet targeted goals. Effective writers often revisit per writing, drafting, and revising multiple times. Jennifer reflects, revises, and improves her writing based on her purpose and audience. This demonstrates a recursive understanding of the writing process, which is key for developing strong writing skills. Why the other options are less accurate. A. Maintaining a focus on informing an audience. Right arrow narrative writing is not primarily informative, it's telling a story. B. Having adequate background knowledge. Right arrow helpful, but this doesn't explain her process choices. C. Patterning writing on exemplary texts. Right arrow, she uses models initially, but the key focus here is her recursive use of the process, not modeling sentence structures. Praxis typify scenario describes a student moving between per-writing, drafting, and revising based on reflection or audience. Right, look for recursive and flexible use of the writing process. Flashcard 37. A kindergarten teacher prepares to use an interactive read aloud to enhance students' vocabulary knowledge. Which of the following best describes a guideline the teacher should adhere to when selecting the vocabulary words the students will learn? A. Words that are abstract in meaning should be chosen because they require more frequent exposure before students can conceptualize them. B. Words that are used multiple times should be chosen because they provide students with repeated exposure in a meaningful context. C. Words that represent a variety of disparate themes should be chosen because they help to broaden students' background knowledge. D. Words that are unique to an individual text should be chosen because they are not likely to be seen elsewhere by students. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Words that are used multiple times should be chosen because they provide students with repeated exposure in a meaningful context. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher is planning an interactive read aloud to enhance vocabulary knowledge. Goal: students learn and retain new words from the text. Key strategy: repeated exposure in context. Step 2. Why B is correct. B. Words that are used multiple times should be chosen. Words that appear more than once allow students to hear them in context multiple times, make connections between usage and meaning, retain the words in long-term memory. Repetition in meaningful contexts is a research-supported strategy for vocabulary development in young learners. Why the other options are less effective. A. Abstract words. Right arrow harder for kindergartners to understand, best for later grades. C. Words from disparate themes. Right arrow background knowledge is useful, but repeated exposure is more critical for retention at this stage. D. Unique words. Right arrow rarely encountered words are less likely to be reinforced outside the read aloud, limiting retention. Praxis tip for interactive read-alouds and vocabulary instruction. Focus on words that recur in the text. Right arrow maximizes comprehension and retention. Save rare or abstract words for advanced instruction or explicit teaching. Flashcard 38. A teacher provides students with sentences to use to determine the meanings of words according to their contexts. Which of the following sentences best fulfills the teacher's purpose? A. Decomposers are beneficial to the environment. B. Please reanalyze the errors in the assignment. C. Omnivorous animals prefer eating both plants and meat. D. My radius is broken, but the doctor says the injury is not life-threatening. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Omnivorous animals prefer eating both plants and meat. Step 1. Analyze the teacher's purpose. The teacher wants students to determine word meanings from context. Key: the sentence should provide enough surrounding information for students to infer the meaning of the word without outside resources. Step 2. Why C is correct. C. Omnivorous animals prefer eating both plants and meat. Context clues: prefer eating both plants and meat. Students can infer that omnivorous means eating both plants and meat. Sentence supports independent meaning making. Exactly what the teacher wants. Why the other options are less effective. A. Decomposers are beneficial to the environment. Right arrow not enough context to infer meaning. Students don't know how decomposers are beneficial. B. Please reanalyze the errors in the assignment. Right arrow the meaning of reanalyze is fairly transparent but requires knowledge of analyze. Less effective for context to practice. D. My radius is broken, but the doctor says the injury is not life-threatening. Right arrow radius could be a bone or a geometric term. Context isn't sufficient for inference. Praxis tip when determining word meaning from context. Look for sentences that provide explicit clues about the word's meaning. Make it possible to infer meaning without prior knowledge. Flashcard 39. A teacher selects both fiction and non-fiction texts that all students in a guided reading group can read independently with 95% accuracy. The teacher instructs the students to read the texts aloud together chorally 4 times over a period of time. Which of the following changes to the activity best facilitates reading fluency? A. Including only texts that students can read with 100% accuracy. B. Choosing either all fiction or all non-fiction texts. C. Modeling how to read the selected texts before asking the students to read them. D. Introducing key vocabulary words before having students read the text. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Modeling how to read the selected texts before asking the students to read them. Step 1. Analyze the activity. Students are reading texts chorally multiple times. Goal: improve reading fluency, which includes accuracy rate, expression/prosody. Fluency develops when students hear and see how fluent reading sounds and then practice reading like that. Step 2. Why C is correct. C. Modeling how to read the selected texts before asking the students to read them. Teacher demonstrates fluent reading, including proper phrasing, intonation, and expression. Students internalize prosody and pacing before practicing. Provides a clear model of what fluent reading sounds like, which research shows is critical for developing fluency. Why the other options are less effective. Including only 100% accuracy texts. Right arrow too easy. Fluency benefits from slightly challenging texts that require practice. B. Choosing all fiction or all non-fiction. Right arrow genre doesn't directly impact fluency development. D. Introducing key vocabulary. Right arrow helpful for comprehension, but does not directly improve prosody, rate, or expression. Praxis tip for fluency instruction. Always model fluent reading before independent or choral practice. Focus on accuracy, expression, and pacing, not just word recognition. Flashcard 40. A teacher selects words from a storybook and places them in a pocket attached to the back cover. The student removes all the familiar words from the pocket and attempts to find the remaining words within the text of the story. Which of the following is the instructional purpose of the activity? A. Enhancing reading fluency. B. Developing phonemic awareness. C. Building sight word vocabulary. D. Recognizing initial consonants in words. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Building sight word vocabulary. Step 1. Analyze the activity. Teacher places words from the storybook in a pocket. Student removes familiar words. Student searches for the remaining words in the text. Key idea of the activity emphasizes recognition of words by sight, not decoding or sounds. Step 2. Identify the instructional purpose. C. Building sight word vocabulary. Sight words equals words that students recognize automatically without decoding. Searching for words in context helps students reinforce visual memory of words, increase reading speed and fluency over time. This is a vocabulary-focused activity, specifically targeting sight words. Why the other options are less accurate. A. Enhancing reading fluency. Right arrow could be a side effect, but the main focus is word recognition, not fluent reading of connected text. B. Developing phonemic awareness. Right arrow. The activity doesn't require manipulating sounds. D. Recognizing initial consonants. Right arrow. The focus is whole word recognition, not single letters. Praxis tip. If a question describes a word hunt or sight word activity, the main goal is usually right building sight word vocabulary. Flashcard 41. During a small group literacy workshop, a teacher reads a classic fairy tale aloud to students. While reading, the teacher stops to discuss how good readers adjust the pitch and volume of their voice, use punctuation cues to attend to proper phrasing, and read with natural expression. The teacher's instruction primarily emphasizes which of the following components of reading fluency? A. Accuracy. B. Prosody. C. Automaticity. D. Rate. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Prosody. Step 1. Analyze the activity. The teacher is focusing on adjusting pitch and volume using punctuation cues for phrasing. Reading with natural expression. Notice the emphasis is on how the text is read aloud, not just recognizing words. Step 2. Identify the fluency component. B. Prosody. Prosody equals the expression, intonation, and rhythm used when reading aloud. Includes a pitch and stress. Phrasing, emotion, and expression enhances comprehension by reflecting the meaning and structure of the text. Why the other options are less accurate. Accuracy. Right arrow focuses on correctly decoding words, not expression. C. Automaticity. Right arrow refers to reading words quickly and effortlessly, not expressively. D. Rate. Right arrow refers to speed of reading, not pitch, phrasing, or expression. Praxis tip. If a question mentions expression, intonation, or using punctuation for phrasing, it's about right prosody, a key component of fluency. Flashcard 42. A teacher laminates pictures of book covers for several favorite read-aloud stories and places them in the retelling center. Student A chooses a cover and, without showing it to Student B, describes the beginning, middle, and end of the story. Student B guesses which story Student A is describing. The activity is best suited to reinforce which of the following literacy skills? A. Developing oral reading fluency. B. Conveying a point of view. C. Visualizing a book's story elements. D. Interpreting a communicated message. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Interpreting a communicated message. Step 1. Analyze the activity. Student A describes the story without showing the cover. Student B must listen and interpret the description to guess the story. Focuses on communicating and understanding information orally. Step 2. Identify the literacy skill. D. Interpreting a communicated message. Student B must decode the meaning of Student A's words. The activity emphasizes listening comprehension and making sense of someone else's message. Supports language comprehension and critical thinking. Why the other options are less accurate. Developing oral reading fluency. Right arrow students are speaking, not reading aloud from a text. B. Conveying a point of view. Right arrow the goal isn't persuasion or expressing opinions. C. Visualizing a book's story elements. Right arrow, while visualization may occur internally, the main skill is understanding and interpreting another student's description. Praxis tip. When an activity involves listening to a peer describe something and making sense of it, the focus is right interpreting a communicated message. Flashcard 43. The table shown represents data gathered by a classroom teacher after administering diagnostic reading assessments to a second-grade class over the course of the school year. Shown are the data for a specific student as well as the class averages. Average number of words read correctly per minute. Grade 2 class average: fall 51, winter 72, spring 89, Daniel fall 48, winter 67, spring 80. Which of the following instructional supports is best justified by the data shown? A. Enhancing self-monitoring strategies. B. Strengthening vocabulary development. C. Developing greater reading fluency. D. Increasing text comprehension. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Developing greater reading fluency. Step 1. Analyze the data. The table shows words read correctly per minute. WCPM for Daniel compared to the class average. Period. Class average: Daniel fall 5 in 40, winter 72 in 67, spring 89. Daniel's reading rate is consistently below the class average. WCPM is a measure of reading fluency, which includes speed, accuracy, and prosody. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. C. Developing greater reading fluency. Since Daniel is below average in words read correctly per minute, he would benefit from fluency instruction. Repeated reading, choral reading, modeling, fluent reading. Improving fluency will increase reading rate, accuracy, and expression, helping him catch up to peers. Why the other options are less accurate. A. Enhancing self-monitoring strategies. Right arrow: useful for comprehension, but WCPM shows fluency issues. B. Strengthening vocabulary development. Right arrow: vocabulary may help comprehension, but the data show rate of word reading, not comprehension. D. Increasing text comprehension. Right arrow: comprehension is not directly measured here. The focus is words per minute. Praxis tip: if the data show words read correctly per minute, look for answers related to right reading fluency, not comprehension or vocabulary. Flashcard 44. When using a newspaper article for a shared reading activity, no students in the class can explain the meaning of the word absence in the following passage. Sam was chosen because he is considered the best investigator of mechanical failures. The bridge collapsed overnight, yet the video shows no people, animals, or warnings of a problem. Sam read the report twice, yet he still could not overcome the absence of cause and gain a clear understanding about the factors that explained the disaster. Based on the passage, which of the following teacher-directed questions is most appropriate for students learning to identify the meaning of unknown words? A. Which definition in the dictionary explains the meaning of the word absence? B. Was Sam confused because there were no people or animals near the bridge? C. How would you use the word absence in a sentence? D. Do the surrounding words offer a clue about the meaning? Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Do the surrounding words offer a clue about the meaning of the word absence? Step 1. Analyze the passage. Key sentence: Sam read the report twice, yet he still could not overcome the absence of cause and gain a clear understanding about the factors that explain the disaster. Students do not know the meaning of absence. The surrounding context mentions no people, animals, or warnings, and that Sam could not gain understanding, giving clues to meaning. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. D. Do the surrounding words offer a clue about the meaning? This teaches students a context clue strategy. Look at words and sentences around an unknown word, infer meaning without immediately using a dictionary. Encourages active reading and comprehension skills, crucial for independent word learning. Why the other options are less effective? Which definition in the dictionary explains the meaning? Right arrow promotes lookup rather than learning to infer meaning from context. B. Was Sam confused because there were no people or animals? Right arrow too narrow doesn't guide students to link context clues to the meaning of absence. C. How would you use the word absence in a sentence? Right arrow assumes students already know the meaning, not appropriate for initial vocabulary instruction. Praxis tip: when teaching students to determine the meaning of unknown words, the key strategy is right use surrounding text to infer meaning. Context clues. Flashcard 45. A teacher begins a new unit on writing a persuasive letter. Which of the following instructional methods is best for the teacher to use during the planning stage? A. Providing students with a predetermined list of topic options. B. Pairing students to share sentences orally before writing them. C. Helping students determine appropriate goals for their letters. D. Presenting a checklist to students for evaluating their letters. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Helping students determine appropriate goals for their letters. Step 1. Analyze the writing stage. The teacher is in the planning stage of writing a persuasive letter. Planning involves deciding what to write about, determining the purpose and goal of the writing, organizing ideas before drafting. Step 2. Identify the instructional focus. C. Helping students determine appropriate goals for their letters. Persuasive writing requires a clear goal or argument during planning. Students must decide what they want to persuade the reader to do or think. Plan how to structure their reasons and evidence. This aligns perfectly with the planning stage of the writing process, while the other options are less accurate. A. Providing a predetermined list of topics. Right arrow focuses on topic selection, not the goal or purpose of persuasion. The pairing students to share sentences orally. Right arrow part of drafting or revising, not planning. D. Presenting a checklist for evaluating letters. Right arrow part of revising or self-assessment after planning and drafting. Praxis tip. Planning stage equals deciding purpose, goal, and structure. Drafting stage equals putting sentences together. Revising stage equals improving and evaluating writing. Flashcard 46. Which of the following instructional strategies is best for a first-grade teacher to use with emergent readers? A. Teaching a mini-lesson on a specific skill and asking students to complete independent practice of that skill. B. Demonstrating 2 or 3 reading objectives in one lesson and facilitating guided practice for each of the objectives. C. Designing a series of lessons with one reading objective and providing modeling, think aloud, and guided practice of the objective. D. Providing students with time to read independently and helping them select books with proper leveling, content, and interest factors. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Designing a series of lessons with one reading objective and providing modeling, think aloud, and guided practice of the objective. Step 1. Understand the student population. Emergent readers first grade are still developing letter sound knowledge, phonemic awareness, basic decoding, and comprehension skills. They benefit most from structured, explicit instruction that carefully guides them through one skill at a time. Step 2. Identify the instructional strategy. C. Designing a series of lessons with one reading objective and providing modeling, think alouds, and guided practice of the objective. Focus on a single objective avoids overwhelming students. Modeling and think alouds show students exactly how to approach a skill. Guided practice allows support while students try the skill themselves. Supports gradual release of responsibility. I do right arrow, we do right arrow, you do. Why the other options are less effective. Mini-lesson and independent practice. Right arrow, too little guided support for emergent readers. They need more modeling. B. Demonstrating multiple objectives. Right arrow overloads emergent readers. Difficult to master multiple skills in one lesson. D. Independent reading with leveled books. Right arrow important, but without prior modeling and guided practice. Emergent readers may struggle and not develop the targeted skill. Praxis tip for emergent readers. Use one objective per lesson. Provide modeling, think alouds, and guided practice. Reserve independent practice for later, after skills are scaffolded. Flashcard 47. The instructional strategy list through Playable is most effective for teaching which of the following? A. Vocabulary. B. Phonics skills. C. Concepts. D. Phonological awareness. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Vocabulary. Step 1. Analyze the strategy list through Playable involves 3 steps. List the students. Generate a list of words related to a topic group. Students categorize the words based on shared characteristics. Labels. Students create a label for each category that describes the group. This is a categorization and labeling activity, which helps students understand meanings and relationships between words. Step 2. Identify the instructional purpose. A. Vocabulary. The strategy explicitly targets word meanings and semantic relationships help students expand vocabulary by grouping and labeling related words encourages deeper understanding than just memorizing definitions, while the other options are less accurate. B. Phonics skills. Right arrow focuses on sound-letter relationships, not semantic groupings. C. Concepts. Right arrow. While students may understand concepts through words, the primary focus is vocabulary development. D. Phonological awareness. Right arrow focuses on hearing and manipulating sounds, not categorizing or labeling words. Praxis typification strategy involves listing words, grouping them, and labeling categories. Think of right vocabulary development and semantic relationships. Flashcard 48. While reading a short passage from a realistic fiction story aloud to the class, a student reads the following sentence: "I didn't think what I had done was so bad, but my mother sure knows how to make a mountain out of a molehill." The teacher focuses the student's attention on the author's use of the phrase "to make a mountain out of a molehill" as an example of figurative language. Which of the following teacher actions is the most appropriate next step in helping students understand the phrase? A. Having students recall other texts in which an author has used other unique linguistic structures. B. Asking students to decide whether the literal meaning of the phrase is the author's intended message. C. Adding the phrase to a student-created poster of author's tools used to convey meaning by using language in interesting ways. D. Requiring that students write of their personal reactions to the author's purpose. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Asking students to decide whether the literal meaning of the phrase is the author's intended message. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Student reads, "I didn't think what I had done was so bad, but my mother sure knows how to make a mountain out of a molehill." Teacher highlights figurative language. The idiom "make a mountain out of a molehill." Key goal: help students understand the figurative meaning, not just recognize the words. Step 2. Identify the appropriate next step. B. Asking students to decide whether the literal meaning of the phrase is the author's intended message encourages students to compare literal versus figurative meaning, understand the author's intent, begin critical thinking about language use and context, directly addresses comprehension of figurative language, a key reading skill. Why the other options are less effective. Recall other texts with unique linguistic structures. Right arrow. 2. General doesn't focus on understanding the specific figurative phrase. C. Add the phrase to a poster of author's tools. Right arrow. Good for later reinforcement but not for immediate comprehension. D. Write explanations of personal reactions. Right arrow. More about response to the text, not understanding figurative meaning. Praxis tip when teaching figurative language. Identify the phrase. Ask students to compare literal and figurative meanings. Discuss the author's intended meaning in context. Flashcard 49. The two best predictors of a beginning reader's future reading success are alphabetic knowledge and the development of a phonics skills. B. Reading fluency. S. Sight word recognition. D. Phonemic awareness. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Phonemic awareness. Step 1. Analyze the question. The question asks for the two best predictors of future reading success in beginning readers. Alphabetic knowledge, knowing letters and their names. Another foundational skill that supports reading development. We are looking for a skill that is strongly linked to decoding and early reading acquisition. Step 2. Identify the correct skill. D. Phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness equals the ability to hear, identify, and manipulate individual sounds, phonemes, in spoken words. Research shows it is a strong predictor of reading achievement, especially when combined with knowledge of letters. Supports decoding, spelling, word recognition together with alphabetic knowledge. Phonemic awareness allows children to translate sounds to letters, the core of early reading success. Why the other options are less accurate. A. Phonics skills. Right arrow. Phonics builds on phonemic awareness and letter knowledge. It's important, but phonemic awareness precedes phonics developmentally. B. Reading fluency. Right arrow. Fluency develops after decoding and phonemic awareness are in place. C. Sight word recognition. Right arrow supports reading, but is not as strong a predictor as phonemic awareness for beginning readers. Praxis tip for beginning readers. The two strongest predictors of reading success are alphabetic knowledge, letters, phonemic awareness, sounds. Flashart 50. The following sentence appears in a non-fiction book that fourth-grade students are reading in class. Unfamiliar words selected by students are underlined in the excerpt. The duck-billed platypus is a peculiar animal in that its snout, which does not look like a nose, helps it recognize sources of food. Which of the following instructional methods will best help students understand and retain the meaning of the new words? A. Asking students to look up the definitions of the words and write them in their reading journals. B. Helping students find easily understood synonyms for each word and write them in place of the new vocabulary. C. Advising students to examine the use of each word in context and narrow connotations for the words to a singular context. D. Discussing each new word by asking students probing questions that require the students to support their answers with reasoning. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Discussing each new word by asking students probing questions that require the students to support their answers with reasoning. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Students encounter unfamiliar words in a non-fiction text. Goal: help students understand and retain the meanings of these words, not just memorize definitions. Key principle: vocabulary learning is most effective when students actively engage with words and construct meaning through reasoning and context. Step 2. Identify the instructional method. D. Discussing each new word by asking students probing questions that require the students to support their answers with reasoning encourages deep processing of the words. As students think about meaning in context, they justify their understanding. Strengthening retention promotes critical thinking and semantic connections, more effective than just looking up words or replacing them with synonyms. Because students are actively constructing knowledge, why the other options are less effective. A. Looking up definitions and writing them right arrow passive may not lead to long-term retention or deep understanding. The finding synonyms and writing them right arrow could obscure nuance, does not ensure students understand precise meaning in context. C. Examining context and narrowing connotations right arrow somewhat effective, but does not require reasoning or discussion, so engagement and retention are weaker. Praxis tip for vocabulary instruction in non-fiction texts: use discussion, questioning, and reasoning to help students engage deeply with word meanings. Encourage students to justify interpretations based on context. Flashart 51. A group of students have an accuracy rate of 94% and above on a recent running record. Which of the following activities will best help improve the development of the students' reading skills? A. Continuing to read books at the current level because students are succeeding. B. Reading familiar books with a partner of a lower reading level. C. Reading books at the next level with teacher support. D. Listening independently to audiobooks from the next level. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Reading books at the next level with teacher support. Step 1. Analyze the data. Students have an accuracy rate of 94% or higher on a running record. Running records measure accuracy words, read correctly, fluency, sometimes comprehension. An accuracy rate of 94% plus indicates that the text is slightly below or at instructional level, and students are ready for a slightly more challenging text. Step 2. Identify the appropriate instructional activity. C. Reading books at the next level with teacher support. This is instructional level reading, where the text is slightly more challenging than independent reading. Teacher support allows students to decode unfamiliar words, discuss comprehension strategies, practice fluency with guidance, promotes growth in reading skills without frustration. Why the other options are less effective? Continuing at current level right arrow students aren't being challenged enough, limited growth. B. Reading with a partner of lower level right arrow may not provide sufficient challenge. Peer reading doesn't guarantee skill development. D. Listening independently to audiobooks right arrow supports comprehension but doesn't practice decoding or fluency at the next level. Praxis tip: independent reading 95% plus accuracy, instructional reading 90 minus 94% accuracy. supported by teacher frustration. Reading below 90% accuracy, students at 94% plus are ready for guided practice at the next level. Flashcard 52. Which of the following is a primary benefit of including mentor texts in an instructional program to develop students' writing abilities? A. Improving students' skill in applying standard English conventions in their own writing by focusing on an author's accuracy in written expression. B. Showing examples that students can emulate of how an author communicates ideas through elements such as word choice, text structure, and point of view. C. Allowing students to self-assess their writing pieces by using writing models to create rubrics that clearly describe elements of effective writing. D. Encouraging students to progress through the steps in the writing process fluently and quickly by allowing them to use models that demonstrate the relationship between writing and oral language. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Showing examples that students can emulate of how an author communicates ideas through elements such as word choice, text structure, and point of view. Step 1. Analyze the purpose of mentor texts. Mentor texts are high-quality examples of writing that teachers use to show students how authors communicate ideas. Highlight text features, structure, word choice, and style serve as models for students to emulate in their own writing. They are not just for teaching grammar or self-assessment, but for understanding how effective writing works in context. Step 2. Identify the primary benefit. B. Showing examples that students can emulate of how an author communicates ideas through elements such as word choice, text structure, and point of view. Students learn to analyze text features and apply strategies in their own writing. Encourages imitation of good writing techniques, which improves both style and structure. Supports genre awareness and purposeful writing, while the other options are less accurate. Focusing on accuracy of conventions. Mentor texts are about meaning and craft, not primarily grammar instruction. C. Self-assessment. Using mentor texts. Useful, but secondary benefit, not the main instructional purpose. D. Fluency and relationship between writing and oral language. Mentor texts support writing development, but fluency is not the primary benefit. Praxis tip: when asked about mentor texts, think of they model high-quality writing for students to study and emulate. Flashcard 53. A fifth-grade teacher wants students to create semantic gradients to expand their understanding of known vocabulary words. The teacher provides students with a children's thesaurus to help them complete the assignment. Which of the following is a major limitation of using only a thesaurus for this activity? A. The students may not be able to spell the words correctly. B. A thesaurus does not distinguish between shades of meaning. C. Students cannot distinguish between synonyms and antonyms. D. The thesaurus does not have a wide variety of words in it. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. A thesaurus does not distinguish between shades of meaning. Step 1. Analyze the task. Students are creating semantic gradients, which involve ordering words from one extreme meaning to another. For example, hot, warm, cool, cold. Understanding subtle differences in meaning between related words. A children's thesaurus provides synonyms, but it doesn't explain the nuanced differences between them. Step 2. Identify the limitation. B. A thesaurus does not distinguish between shades of meaning. Synonyms listed in a thesaurus may have similar meanings, but the degree, connotation, or context often differs. Semantic gradients require students to evaluate these nuances, which the thesaurus alone cannot provide, while the other options are less accurate. A. Spelling. A thesaurus provides correct spelling, not a major limitation. C. Synonyms versus antonyms. Some thesauruses include antonyms, and this activity is focused on gradients of meaning, not antonyms. D. Limited vocabulary. Children's thesauruses have a sufficient range for this activity. The bigger issue is distinguishing meaning, not quantity of words. Praxis tip: semantic gradients equals focus on subtle differences in meaning. Thesaurus alone is insufficient because it lists words without clarifying nuance. Flashcard 54. As part of a social studies unit on the American Revolution, A sixth-grade teacher plans to prepare students to read a short historical non-fiction novel about the Boston Tea Party. Which of the following pre-reading strategies will best assist the teacher in building students' background knowledge and improving their general understanding of the topic? A. Providing time for students to skim the text and create a list of new vocabulary words and ideas that the author discusses. B. Encouraging students to look at the illustrations in the text and discuss with a partner what they see in the images. C. Presenting a list of statements about the topic and having students indicate whether they agree or disagree with each one. D. Having students visit approved websites before reading the text to view video clips and primary documents related to the topic. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Having students visit approved websites before reading the text to view video clips and primary documents related to the topic. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Goal: prepare sixth-grade students to read a historical, non-fiction novel about the Boston Tea Party. Key objective: build background knowledge so students can better understand historical events, concepts, and context in the text. Students may not have prior knowledge about colonial America, tea taxes, protest strategies, and historical significance. Step 2. Identify the pre-reading strategy. D. Having students visit approved websites before reading the text to view video clips and primary documents related to the topic exposes students to multiple sources of information, builds contextual understanding of historical events, supports comprehension by allowing students to connect prior knowledge with new content, provides authentic historical evidence, visuals, primary sources, why the other options are less effective. Skimming for vocabulary and ideas, right arrow useful for identifying new terms, but doesn't provide prior context to support comprehension. B. Discussing illustrations, right arrow helpful, but historical non-fiction texts may have limited or symbolic images. This alone won't build sufficient background. C. Agree/disagree statements, right arrow encourages thinking critically, but without sufficient background knowledge, students may misinterpret the statements. Praxis tip for pre-reading historical texts: use multimedia resources and primary sources to build prior knowledge. Background knowledge significantly supports comprehension in non-fiction reading. Flashcard 55. A teacher recognizes that organizing a class word wall by syllable type will help provide an ongoing visual reference for students during both direct instruction and independent writing activities. To incorporate this resource with content-based instruction, the teacher uses the word wall during a unit that focuses on geography. Place each word next to the syllable type that it best exemplifies. Match A, B, C, and D to the options listed are controlled vowel consonant T, closed syllable vowel T, May, inlet B, harbor C, stream D, lake. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is R, controlled B, harbor vowel consonant T, D, lake, closed syllable A, inlet vowel T, May, C, stream. Flashcard 56. Below are various problems students encounter when self-selecting texts. Match each strategy A, B, C, and D a teacher can use to best solve each student's problem 1, 2, 3, and 4.1. The student selects a text that has too high a reading level 2. The student chooses the same book repeatedly 3. The student is overwhelmed with selecting a text 4. The student no longer enjoys a book he or she has been reading A. Encourage the student to select a book by a favorite author or topic B. Suggest the student read the book using paired reading with a parent C. Ask the student about his or her interests and explain how the books are organized in the library D. Provide several book choices and encourage the student to determine the readability of a text before making a selection. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is 1. The student selects a text that has too high a reading level B. Suggest the student read the book using paired reading with a parent 2. The student chooses the same book repeatedly A. Encourage the student to select a book by a favorite author or topic 3. The student is overwhelmed with selecting a text as C. Ask the student about his or her interests and explain how the books are organized in the library 4. The student no longer enjoys a book he or she has been reading. D. Provide several book choices and encourage the student to determine the readability of a text before making a selection. Flashcard 57. During a whole class literacy lesson, a third-grade teacher uses an electronic whiteboard to display the paragraph below. Some studies have shown that it is good practice to not allow students to chew gum in class. While some students may think this is unfair, there are many good reasons why this is a good rule. A is familiar with identifying an author's purpose and conveying information in a wide variety of literary genres. B. Analyzes the degree to which transition words and phrases are repeated in a text to achieve coherency. C. Can evaluate the degree to which the vocabulary an author selects communicates new ideas in a clear, concise manner. D. As knowledge of organizational patterns and cue words found in various fiction and non-fiction text structures. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Has knowledge of organizational patterns and cue words found in various fiction and non-fiction text structures. Step 1. Analyze the passage and instructional focus. The teacher displays a paragraph about why students should not chew gum in class. The passage contains cue words and transitional phrases such as first of all, consequently, as a result, therefore. These words indicate logical relationships between ideas and the structure of the informational text. The teacher conducts a think aloud, modeling how noticing the structure and cue words supports comprehension. Step 2. Identify the instructional purpose. D. Has knowledge of organizational patterns and cue words found in various fiction and non-fiction text structures. Knowing common text structures, for example, cause-effect, problem solution, chronological, compare contrast, help students predict what comes next. Identify the main idea and supporting details. Understand how the author organizes information. The teacher's think aloud highlights organizational patterns and signal words to improve comprehension, while the other options are less accurate. A. Identifying an author's purpose in various genres. Right arrow useful, but the focus here is on text structure, not purpose. The analyzing repeated transition words. Right arrow too narrow. Comprehension is about how words indicate structure and relationships, not just frequency. C. Evaluating vocabulary for clarity. Right arrow important, but the teacher is modeling structure and cue words, not vocabulary choice. Praxis tip: when a passage contains words like first, consequently, therefore, as a result, think text structure and comprehension cues. Teaching students to recognize organizational patterns and signal words is a key strategy for understanding informational texts. Flashcard 58. A team of 5th grade teachers collaboratively provide explicit instruction to support the development of students' listening skills. The teachers select a series of videos and recorded books to build students' background knowledge, vocabulary, understanding of text structures, and inferencing abilities. The teacher's actions best indicate an understanding of which of the following research-based findings related to the connection between listening and reading comprehension. A. The influence of listening comprehension on reading comprehension increases over time, since both require the application of similar language processes. B. Content presented orally is of greater interest to and easier for students to process than reading a text that requires proficient word recognition skills. C. As students develop more advanced literacy skills over the elementary years, the influence of listening comprehension on reading Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. The influence of listening comprehension on reading comprehension increases over time, since both require the application of similar language processes. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. 5th grade teachers provide explicit instruction in listening skills using videos, recorded books. They focus on building background knowledge, vocabulary, text structure awareness, and inferencing goals. Support reading comprehension through listening comprehension. Step 2. Identify the research-based finding. The influence of listening comprehension on reading comprehension increases over time, since both require the application of similar language processes. Listening and reading comprehension rely on similar cognitive and language skills, such as vocabulary knowledge, syntax understanding, inferencing, monitoring, comprehension. Research shows that as students grow, listening comprehension increasingly predicts reading comprehension, especially when decoding skills are strong. Why the other options are less accurate. B. Content presented orally is easier to process. Right arrow. While partially true, the focus is not on ease of processing but on the connection between listening and reading comprehension. C. Incomplete option. Right arrow, likely referring to influence over time, but it fully captures the research-supported connection. Praxis Tip. Strong listening comprehension supports reading comprehension, especially as students progress through elementary school. Teaching listening skills in context-rich settings. Videos, read-alouds reinforces language processes used in reading. Flashcard 59. A teacher notices that her student reads fluently but struggles to understand the text afterward. Which of the following strategies is best for the teacher to implement to help increase the student's understanding? A. Lowering the readability level of text the student is reading. B. Limiting comprehension questions about the text to literal questions. C. Encouraging the student to think about connections with the text. D. Requiring the student to do increased time trials of short passages of text. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Encouraging the student to think about connections with the text. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The student reads fluently. Accuracy, rate, prosody are strong. The student struggles with comprehension, meaning fluency alone is not sufficient for understanding. Goal: help the student improve meaning making while reading. Step 2. Identify the appropriate strategies. C. Encouraging the student to think about connections with the text. This is a comprehension strategy known as making connections, which can include a text-to-self connections, text-to-text connections, text-to-world connections. Help students actively engage with the content, enhancing understanding beyond literal reading. Why the other options are less effective. Lowering readability level. Right arrow, the text may already be appropriate. Fluency indicates the student can handle the current level. B. Limiting to literal questions. Right arrow restricts high-level thinking and deeper comprehension skills. D. Increased time trials. Right arrow focuses on fluency, which the student already has, doesn't address comprehension. Praxis tip for students who read fluently but struggle with comprehension. Focus on active engagement strategies, connections, questioning, visualization, summarization. Fluency alone does not guarantee understanding. Flashcard 60. A teacher prepares 2 visuals to model the components of a particular type of writing. A video clip of an advertisement featuring a well-known athlete as the spokesperson for a popular brand of shoe. A pamphlet for mobile phone insurance that features images of damaged and cracked mobile devices. The visuals best facilitate instruction about which of the following types of writing? A. Narrative. B. Persuasive. C. Expository. D. Descriptive. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Persuasive. Step 1A. Analyze the visuals. Video clip of an advertisement with a celebrity spokesperson. Right arrow attempts to convince viewers to buy a product. Pamphlet showing damaged phones to sell insurance. Right arrow emphasizes need and benefits, aiming to persuade the audience. Key point: to both examples are designed to influence the audience's opinions or actions. Step 2. Identify the type of writing. B. Persuasive. Persuasive writing seeks to convince or influence the audience, uses strategies like appeals to emotions, authority, logic, or need. Includes advertisements, opinion pieces, letters, and campaigns. These visuals model persuasive techniques effectively. Why the other options are less accurate. A. Narrative. Right arrow tells a story with characters and events. These examples inform or persuade, not narrate. C. Expository. Right arrow explains or informs, while some persuasion uses facts. The main goal here is influence, not just explanation. D. Descriptive. Right arrow provides detailed sensory descriptions. Visuals emphasize persuasion, not purely description. Praxis tip: when identifying types of writing, ask or write what is the author's primary goal. Persuasive writing equals convince or influence the audience. Flashcard 61. A third-grade student recently qualified for gifted services. The student typically receives perfect or near perfect scores on classroom work and writing assignments and does not need to study or prepare in advance for comprehensive examinations. Which of the following is most important when assessing the student? A. Modifying assessments for the student so as to increase their rigor. B. Involving the student in devising any assessment to be given. C. Exempting the student from taking assessments in favor of independent study. D. Placing the student in an alternate location during assessments to reduce testing time. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Modifying assessments for the student so as to increase their vigor. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The student is gifted and consistently demonstrates high achievement. Classroom assignments and assessments are not challenging enough. Goal: ensure assessments accurately measure the student's knowledge and skills while providing opportunities for growth. Step 2. Identify the most important assessment strategy. A. Modifying assessments for the student so as to increase their rigor. Gifted students benefit from enriched or accelerated assessments, higher-order thinking tasks, open-ended or problem-solving questions, opportunities for creativity or extension of content. Purpose: challenge the student appropriately and maintain engagement while the other options are less effective. B. Involving the student in devising assessments. Right arrow can be beneficial but is not the primary method to ensure rigor. C. Exempting the student. Right arrow denies the teacher useful information about student performance on complex or extended tasks. D. Placing in an alternate location to reduce time. Right arrow does not address the need for increased challenge or rigor. Praxis tip: when assessing gifted students, the focus should be on challenging, rigorous, and enriched assessments rather than lowering expectations or exempting them. Flashcard 62. A teacher designs a lesson on black holes as part of a unit on the solar system. Before reading the following paragraphs to the students, the teacher underlines words that are likely to be unfamiliar to them. A. Having students refer to a dictionary or science website to locate the etymology of each underlined word, study it and record it in a reading journal. B. Having students create a visual organizer that displays a definition, synonyms and antonyms, examples and non-examples, and one or two contextual uses for each underlined word. C. Asking students to independently locate each underlined word in a reference source, write the definition of each word using their own words in a journal, and share personal findings with peers. D. Asking students to add the underlined words to personal word banks in their journals. Use each word in a sentence, and prepare note cards to use for periodic review and practice. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Having students create a visual organizer that displays a definition, synonyms and antonyms, examples and non-examples, and one or two contextual uses for each underlined word. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher preselects likely unfamiliar words in a science passage about black holes. Goal: help students develop a deep understanding of these words, not just surface-level recognition. Deep understanding involves knowing definitions, recognizing synonyms and antonyms, seeing examples and non-examples, applying words in context. Step 2. Identify the best instructional strategy. B. Having students create a visual organizer that displays a definition, synonyms and antonyms, examples and non-examples, and one or two contextual uses for each underlined word encourages active engagement with vocabulary, supports multiple dimensions of word knowledge and meaning, context, relationships, and application, promotes long-term retention and transfer of words to reading and writing while the other options are less effective. Referring to etymology. Right arrow interesting, but etymology alone does not guarantee deep understanding or contextual use. C. Looking up definitions independently. Right arrow focuses on surface-level definition, lacks the rich connections and examples needed for deep comprehension. D. Adding words to a personal word bank and using in sentences. Right arrow provides practice, but less comprehensive than the visual organizer in showing relationships and contextual understanding. Praxis tip for academic/science vocabulary. The most effective strategies use visual organizers include definitions, synonyms, antonyms, examples, and context. This helps students read, discuss, and write about complex content with confidence. Flashcard 63. After a shared reading of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, a teacher focuses classroom instruction on how writing in response to reading offers a wide array of choices and creative opportunities. The teacher provides the students with several prompts in response to the reading. Students may choose whichever prompt they prefer but need to understand that the prompts are categorized according to the 4 types of writing they will study throughout the writing process. Place each prompt next to the type of writing that it best helps exemplify it: expository, descriptive, persuasive, narrative. A. Think about the protagonist and antagonist and write a short story using a modern setting. B. Think about whether or not Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn should really be friends and write an essay that explains your reasons. C. Think about the emotions included in the text and write about these with cadence and rhythm. D. Think about. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is expository. D. Think about how the text was structured and write an essay that explains and provides examples of the characteristics of the author's style. Descriptive. C. Think about the emotions included in the text and write about these with cadence and rhythm. Persuasive. B. Think about whether or not Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn should really be friends and write an essay that explains your reasons. Narrative. A. Think about the protagonist and antagonist and write a short story using a modern setting. Flashcard 64. At the beginning of the school year, second-grade teachers meet to collaborate on a comprehensive instructional plan to teach students the 5-step writing process. The teachers set a goal of creating a systematic writing program that will result in students requiring less direct guidance and support while moving toward independence over the course of the year. In which of the following teaching models are students engaged in the writing process at the most independent level? A. A teacher and students talk and think aloud as they share in the task of creating a writing piece. B. A teacher observes as students apply their writing skills to produce a draft during the creation of a writing piece. C. A teacher thinks aloud while composing a writing piece and explaining the strategies that are being used. D. Students contribute ideas for a writing piece as the teacher transforms the thoughts into writing. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. A teacher observes as students apply their skills to produce a draft during the creation of a writing piece. Step 1. Analyze the scenario goal. Implement a systematic writing program that gradually moves students toward independence. Focus students' level of engagement and independence in the writing process. The writing process steps include writing, drafting, revising, editing, publishing. Students move from teacher-led modeling to independent application over time. Step 2. Identify the most independent engagement. B. A teacher observes as students apply their writing skills to produce a draft during the creation of a writing piece. Students are actively doing the writing themselves. The teacher provides minimal direct guidance, intervening only if needed. Represents the highest level of independence in the gradual release model, while the other options are less independent. A. Teacher and students share and think aloud. Right arrow guided writing. Teacher heavily scaffolds. C. Teacher thinks aloud while composing. Right arrow modeled writing. Students are passive observers. D. Students contribute ideas while the teacher writes. Right arrow shared writing. Students do not write independently. Praxis tip in gradual release of responsibility. GRR. I do. Right arrow teacher models. We do. Right arrow teacher and students share. You do together. Right arrow collaborative work. You do alone. Right arrow independent application. Answer B. Flashcard 65. A 5th grade student applies metacognitive strategies learned during instruction while reading a novel of choice during free reading time. While conferencing with the teacher about the novel, the student mentions that there are many unfamiliar vocabulary words in the text. Which of the following metacognitive strategies is best for the teacher to suggest when helping the student decipher unknown vocabulary? A. Making notes in the margins of the novel. B. Using context clues and knowledge of affixes. C. Completing a self-created graphic organizer while reading. D. Going back to reread text for clarification. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Using context clues and knowledge of affixes. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The student is a fifth grader reading independently and using metacognitive strategies. Problem: encountering unfamiliar vocabulary words. Goal: teach a strategy to decipher unknown words while reading, supporting meaning making and comprehension. Step 2. Identify the best strategy. B. Using context clues and knowledge of affixes. Context clues: students infer meaning based on surrounding words or sentences. Knowledge of affixes, prefixes, suffixes, and roots helps break down complex words into meaningful parts. Combines metacognition with active vocabulary strategy, enabling students to self-monitor, understanding why the other options are less effective. Making notes in the margins. Right arrow helpful for comprehension tracking, but doesn't provide a strategy for figuring out unknown words. C. Completing a graphic organizer. Right arrow useful for organizing information, but less immediate for decoding unfamiliar words in context. D. Reading text. Right arrow supports comprehension and fluency but may not clarify word meanings independently. Praxis tip: when students encounter unknown words, effective strategies include using context clues, breaking words into affixes and roots. Combining these strategies promotes independent reading and metacognitive awareness. Flashcard 66. When planning instruction to support students' reading development, a third-grade teacher includes the following activities. Engaging students in readers' theater, requiring students to participate in repeated readings, modeling fluent reading of various genres, providing opportunities for independent reading. By engaging students in the activities listed, the teacher best demonstrates an understanding of which of the following principles related to growth in literacy. A reader's ability to consistently process all genres of text at a rapid rate results in deeper comprehension of complex ideas. B. A reader's participation in oral reading activities with peers promotes the reader's interest in wide reading of complex text. C. A reader who can fluently and automatically decode words can give full attention to comprehending a written text. D. A reader's exposure to texts in various genres allows the reader to A. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. A reader who can fluently and automatically decode words can give full attention to comprehending a written text. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Teacher plans activities, including a reader's theater. Right arrow oral reading practice, repeated readings. Right arrow builds fluency, modeling fluent reading. Right arrow demonstrates prosody and expression. Independent reading. Right arrow reinforces practice and comprehension. Common thread: improving fluency. Goal: help students read smoothly and automatically, freeing cognitive resources for comprehension. Step 2. Identify the principles. C. A reader who can fluently and automatically decode words can give full attention to comprehending a written text. Fluency equals accuracy plus rate plus prosody. Fluent readers spend less cognitive energy decoding, allowing more focus on meaning making. These activities directly target word recognition and reading fluency, which support comprehension while the other options are less accurate. Processing all genres at a rapid rate. Right arrow fluency supports comprehension, but rapid reading alone does not guarantee understanding. B. Oral reading with peers promotes interest. Right arrow engagement may increase, but the primary literacy growth is fluency for comprehension. D. Exposure to genres improves comprehension. Right arrow helpful, but fluency is the main principle emphasized in the listed activities. Praxis tip: fluency bridges decoding and comprehension. Effective fluency instruction includes modeling repeated reading, oral reading practice, independent reading. Flashcard 67. A third-grade teacher notices that many students in class exhibit poor reading fluency when asked to read sentences or longer passages aloud and plans to incorporate activities to support fluent reading behaviors. Which three of the following activities best accomplish the teacher's objective? A. Encouraging students to record events from a story while they read. B. Engaging in choral reading as a class for a page of text. C. Asking questions during and after reading a familiar text. D. Modeling one sentence at a time aloud for students to imitate. E. Providing students with a script to practice and read orally in front of their peers. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Engaging in choral reading as a class for a page of text D. Modeling one sentence at a time aloud for students to imitate E. Providing students with a script to practice and read orally in front of their peers. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher's goal: improve students' reading fluency. Reading fluency involves 3 key components: accuracy, reading words correctly, rate, reading at her natural speed, prosody, reading with expression and proper phrasing. Effective fluency instruction provides modeling, repeated practice, and opportunities for oral reading. Step 2. Identify the best activities. B. Engaging in choral reading as a class for a page of text. Students read simultaneously with the teacher and peers. Supports accuracy, rate, and prosody. Reduces performance pressure while building confidence in oral reading. D. Modeling one sentence at a time aloud for students to imitate. Teacher demonstrates correct phrasing and expression. Students practice imitating the model directly. Targets prosody and expression, essential to fluency. Providing students with a script to practice and read orally in front of their peers. Repeated practice with a scripted text helps students build automaticity. Public reading provides motivation and real audience practice, enhancing fluency. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. A. Encouraging students to record events from a story. Right arrow supports comprehension and writing, not fluency. C. Asking questions during/after reading. Right arrow supports comprehension. Monitoring, not oral reading. Fluency praxis tip: fluency building activities focus on oral reading and repeated practice with teacher modeling or peer support. Effective strategies: choral reading, echo reading, reader's theater, repeated reading. Flashcard 68. The data is based on a recent assessment of 4th grade students reading a short passage. The teacher analyzes the data to identify areas most in need of improvement. Which of the following instructional strategies will best meet the needs of Molly, Marcy, and Don? Molly: vocabulary 75%, comprehension 68%, fluency 60%. Marcy: vocabulary 73%, comprehension 65%, fluency 60%. Don: vocabulary 72%, comprehension 70%, fluency 55%. A. Giving the students review activities and games to practice unknown words. B. Pairing these students to read aloud and provide feedback to each other. C. Providing the students with graphic organizers to use while reading. D. Encouraging students to read more books at home for pleasure. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Pairing these students to read about and provide feedback to each other. Step 1. Analyze the data. The students' scores show vocabulary 72 minus 75%, right arrow slightly below grade level expectations. Comprehension 65 minus 70%, right arrow moderate difficulty. Fluency 55 minus 60%, right arrow the lowest area for all 3 students. Primary instructional need: reading fluency, since it's the weakest skill and supports comprehension. Step 2. Identify the best strategy. B. Pairing the students to read aloud and provide feedback to each other. Oral reading with peer feedback targets fluency, rate, expression, phrasing accuracy, decoding errors corrected in real-time engagement, and motivation as students practice in a supportive setting. Peer reading also indirectly supports comprehension and vocabulary because students pay attention to meaning while reading aloud. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. Review activities and games for unknown words. Right arrow focuses on vocabulary, but the main deficit is fluency. C. Graphic organizers. Right arrow support comprehension, but will not improve oral reading fluency directly. D. Encouraging reading at home for pleasure. Right arrow helpful long-term, but does not specifically target fluency deficits immediately. Praxis tip: fluency interventions are most effective when they involve a guided oral reading, repeated practice, immediate feedback from peers or teachers. Flashcard 69. MS. Kirkpatrick, a 5th grade teacher, writes the following sentences on the whiteboard. While walking through the woods, I saw Vixen and her 6 pups. I was amazed at the beauty of the red pelt that covered her body. The teacher's instructional strategy helps students to develop word knowledge by figuring out the meaning of an unknown word using primarily which of the following types of context clues. A. Giving information about word meaning by using signal words that show contrast to the unknown word. B. Looking for other words or phrases that define an unknown word directly and clearly in the sentence in which it appears. C. Restating a word's meaning by using other terms in a sentence with similar meanings to the unknown word's meaning. D. Unlocking a word's meaning that is not directly described but needs to be inferred based on information given by an author. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Unlocking a word's meaning that is not directly described but needs to be inferred based on information given by an author. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher is modeling thinking aloud to determine the meaning of the word vixen. Students are guided to notice clues in the sentence. It is an animal. Female has red fur. The teacher does not provide a direct definition, but instead shows students how to infer meaning from context. Step 2. Identify the type of context clue. D. Unlocking a word's meaning that is not directly described but needs to be inferred based on information given by an author. This is called an inference context clue. Students combine background knowledge with textual clues to determine meaning. The sentence requires students to deduce meaning rather than reading a definition directly. Step 3. Why the other options are less accurate. Using signal words showing contrast. Right arrow refers to contrast clues, e.g. however, but. B. Words or phrases that define directly. Right arrow refers to definition context clues, not inference. C. Using synonyms in the sentence. Right arrow refers to restatement or synonym clues, also not inference. Praxis tip. Types of context clues include definitions / restatement. Right arrow word is defined within the sentence. Synonym. Right arrow word meaning is hinted by a similar word. Antonyms / contrast. Right arrow meaning inferred from opposite words. Inference. Right arrow meaning inferred from clues in the sentence and background knowledge. Flashcard 70. To address the fluency difficulties faced by students in a guided reading group, the teacher decides to implement reader's theater lessons. Which of the following instructional steps will best support the student's improvement of reading fluency? A. Permitting the students to work as a group to select a text based on their collaborative interests. B. Assigning each student a character part prior to reading the text as a group. C. Modeling the reading of 3 possible texts for students to decide on one. D. Asking students to read the text independently and orally before choosing character parts. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Asking students to read the text independently and orally before choosing character parts. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher wants to improve reading fluency using reader's theater. Reading fluency involves accuracy, correct word reading rate, reading at her natural speed, prosody, proper phrasing, and expression. Effective reader's theater instruction includes familiarity with the text, repeated practice, oral performance with expression. Step 2. Identify the best instructional step. D. Asking students to read the text independently and orally before choosing character parts. Why this works. Students practice reading each line. Increasing familiarity with words and phrasing helps students identify challenging sections before performing. Promotes automaticity and expression in reading, which are key to fluency. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. A. Letting students select the text. Right arrow encourages engagement but does not directly target fluency improvement. B. Assigning character parts before reading. Right arrow students may struggle with unfamiliar words, which reduces fluency. Practice. C. Modeling texts for students to choose from. Right arrow useful for selection, but does not give individual fluency. Practice before performance. Praxis tip. Fluency improvement via reader's theater works best when students read aloud independently. First, practice lines. Repeatedly perform with expression and prosody. Flashcard 71. A first-grade teacher wants to use an analytical approach to instruct students in phoneme-grapheme correspondence. Which of the following instructional scenarios is best for the teacher to use? A. Teaching the Class 1 letter-sound relationship per week in order of the alphabet. B. Assisting students with identifying an unfamiliar word as they read connected text by teaching a specific letter-sound relationship. C. Presenting students with previously learned words to assist them in learning specific letter-sound relationships and patterns. D. Teaching students individual letter-sound relationships and then blending the sounds together to form a recognizable word. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Presenting students with previously learned words to assist them in learning specific letter-sound relationships and patterns. Step 1. Analyze the scenario the teacher wants. An analytical approach to teaching phoneme-grapheme correspondence. Analytical phonics means students start with whole words. They know, analyze patterns and letter-sound relationships within those words, apply the patterns to decode or spell new words. This differs from synthetic phonics, which teaches letter sounds in isolation and then blends them to form words. Step 2. Identify the best scenario. C. Presenting students with previously learned words to assist them in learning specific letter-sound relationships and patterns. Students use familiar words as a reference. They analyze patterns, e.g., cat, bat, hat, to understand grapheme-phoneme connection. Supports transfer of knowledge to new words. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. A. Teaching one letter sound per week in order. Right arrow synthetic approach, not analytical. B. Teaching a letter sound in context of an unfamiliar word. Right arrow focuses on incidental learning, not systematic analysis of known patterns. D. Teaching letter sound and then blending. Right arrow synthetic phonics, not analytical. Praxis tip: analytical phonics equals whole to part approach. Synthetic phonics equals part or whole approach. Remember, analytical focuses on patterns in known words, helping students generalize. Flashcard 72. Which of the following literacy activities best demonstrates a first-grade student applying the literacy principle of decoding and encoding as reciprocal skills? A. Writing teacher-dictated sentences that include words in the CV pattern following instruction and word-sort activities using the pattern. B. Reading a story about a little boy's family pet and recording a spontaneous retelling of the tale for classmates to listen to as a literacy workshop activity. C. Attending closely as a teacher reads a picture book aloud and provides instruction in the various components of print literacy skills. D. Reading a short fictional story independently and creating a story map through a series of drawings that illustrate major story elements. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Writing teacher-dictated sentences that include words in the CV pattern following instruction and word-sort activities using the pattern. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The question focuses on decoding and encoding as reciprocal skills. Decoding: right arrow reading words by applying letter sound knowledge. Encoding: right arrow spelling words by applying the same letter sound knowledge. Reciprocal means the skills reinforce each other. Decoding helps spelling, and encoding helps reading. Step 2. Identify the best activity. Writing teacher-dictated sentences that include words in the CV pattern following instruction and word-sort activities using the pattern. Students read, decode CV words in instruction or word-sort. Students write and code the same words in dictated sentences. This clearly demonstrates the reciprocal relationship between reading and spelling. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. B. Recording a spontaneous retelling. Right arrow focuses on oral language, not decoding/encoding. C. Attending to a read-aloud. Right arrow focuses on listening comprehension and print awareness, not decoding/encoding. D. Creating a story map through drawings. Right arrow focuses on comprehension and visualization, not the reciprocal reading/spelling connection. Praxis tip: reciprocal decoding and encoding activities. Word sorts with reading/spelling. Dictation of patterned words. Writing CVC or CV words after explicit phonics instruction. Flashcard 73. A teacher who is working with students on decoding multisyllabic words in text writes the following words on an anchor chart after students encounter them in their readings for the week. Multisyllabic words: common, butter, flutter, swimming. Which of the following activities will best help the students divide the words into syllables? A. Marking off syllables by using a dot between vowels and consonants. B. Examining long vowel sounds in the words with a stable final syllable. C. Identifying stressed and unstressed vowels in each of the words. D. Breaking up closed syllable words based on consonant splitting. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Breaking up closed syllable words based on consonant splitting. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher is helping students decode multisyllabic words like a common, butter, flutter, swimming. These are all closed syllable words. CVC patterns. A closed syllable ends in a consonant, typically with a short vowel sound, e.g. come on. Dividing words into syllables helps students decode longer words more efficiently. Step 2. Identify the best activity. D. Breaking up closed syllable words based on consonant splitting. Students look for the consonant that separates syllables. Common, right arrow comes / mon, butter, right arrow but / ter, flutter, right arrow flut / ter. This strategy matches the structure of closed syllables and supports decoding of multisyllabic words. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. Marking off syllables by using a dot between vowels and consonants. Right arrow not systematic. May confuse students as syllable boundaries don't always occur strictly between vowels / consonants. B. Examining long vowel sounds in stable final syllables. Right arrow words here are sure vowel closed syllables, so this does not apply. C. Identifying stressed and unstressed vowels. Right arrow useful for advanced multisyllabic words, but less helpful for simple closed syllable words. Praxis to close syllable words. CVC. Right arrow divide between consonants. Open syllable. CV. Right arrow usually end in a vowel. Knowing syllable types is essential for decoding multisyllabic words. Flashcard 74. Students in a 5th grade class are working on writing personal narratives. After examining their first drafts, the teacher realizes the students need additional scaffolding to be successful. Which of the following instructional methods will best help students develop their personal narratives? A. Giving students a list of lively, descriptive, emotional, and precise words to consider using. B. Reminding students that varying sentence structure makes writing more interesting. C. Providing students with a review and checklist for how to write effective thesis statements. D. Encouraging students to support key details with logic, facts, and quantifiable evidence. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Giving students a list of lively, descriptive, emotional, and precise words to consider using. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Students are writing personal narratives and need additional scaffolding. Personal narratives focus on descriptive, engaging, and emotional writing, showing experiences through vivid details rather than just summarizing events. Scaffolding should directly support narrative development, not general writing skills like thesis statements or logical arguments. Step 2. Identify the best instructional method. Giving students a list of lively, descriptive, emotional, and precise words to consider using provides word-level support to enrich narratives. Help students enhance imagery, emotion, and voice in their stories. Directly addresses development of narrative content. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. B. Varying sentence structure. Right arrow improves style, not narrative content. C. Review/checklist for thesis statements. Right arrow relevant to expository or argumentative writing, not personal narratives. D. Supporting details with logic, facts, and evidence. Right arrow relevant for informational or persuasive writing, not personal experiences. Praxis tip for personal narratives. Scaffolding often focuses on word choice. Descriptive, emotional, precise sensory details. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Plot/sequence of events. Flashcard 75. A kindergarten teacher introduces phonics concepts to students early in the school year and works on explicitly teaching short vowel sounds and consonant sounds. Which of the following activities best helps students work on the described phonics concept? A. Sorting one-syllable words that are closed and not closed. B. Using letter tiles to practice vowel digraphs. C. Highlighting words with CVC. E. Patterns in a passage. D. Teaching word families that follow CVC patterns. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Teaching word families. That follows CVC patterns. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. Students are kindergartners. Early in the school year, the teacher is focusing on a short vowel sounds, consonant sounds. Instruction should involve simple, one-syllable words and patterns that match students' developmental level. Step 2. Identify the best activity. D. Teaching word families that follow CVC patterns. CVC words e.g. lamp. Mask include a C equals consonant, V equals short vowel, C equals consonant. Cluster at the end. Sorting or practicing word families reinforces short vowel sounds, vowel in the middle, consonant sounds at the beginning and end. Word families provide a pattern-based approach, which is developmentally appropriate for kindergartners. Step 3. Why the other options are less effective. A. Sorting closed versus not closed words. Right arrow useful later, but too abstract for early short vowel instruction. B. Using letter tiles for vowel digraphs. Right arrow focuses on long vowels / vowel teams, not short vowels. C. Highlighting CVCE patterns. Right arrow focuses on silent T / long vowel words, not short vowels. Praxis tip for kindergarten phonics instruction. Used CVC or CVCC word families focus on short vowels and consonants. Incorporate manipulatives, letter tiles, or word source to make it hands-on. Flashcard 76. A fourth-grade teacher intends to use student performance data to guide lesson planning for small group reading and remediation of specific skills. Which 3 of the following actions are most appropriate for using the data to inform instruction? A. Analyzing data prior to adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. B. Analyzing data after the adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. C. Analyzing data to determine summative descriptions of performance. D. Analyzing data to determine formative descriptions of performance. E. Analyzing data to determine norm reference descriptions of performance. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is A. Analyzing data prior to adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. B. Analyzing data after the adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. D. Analyzing data to determine formative descriptions of performance. Step 1. Analyze the scenario. The teacher wants to use student performance data to plan small group reading lessons, remediate specific skills. This is data-driven instruction, focused on improving student learning formatively. Ongoing adjustments. Step 2. Examine the answer options. A. Analyzing data prior to adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. White heavy checkmark. Teachers must review data first to identify student needs. This allows them to plan targeted instruction before teaching. B. Analyzing data after the adjustment of instructional goals and delivery. White heavy checkmark. After teaching, reviewing data helps determine if the adjustments were effective, supports ongoing instructional refinement. D. Analyzing data to determine formative descriptions of performance. White heavy checkmark. Formative data focuses on day-to-day skill development, identifies specific areas for intervention. Step 3. Why the other options are less appropriate. C. Analyzing data to determine summative descriptions. Right arrow. Summative data is end of unit or final assessments, less helpful for ongoing small group adjustments. E. Analyzing data to determine norm reference descriptions. Right arrow. Norm reference scores compare students to peers, not useful for targeted remediation of specific skills. Praxis tip. Formative, performance-based data guide small group and differentiated instruction. Analyze before and after instruction to make data-driven decisions. Flashcard 77. During a phonics lesson, a third-grade teacher provides direct instruction to a small group of students on how to decode multisyllabic words by identifying the syllable types found within the word and applying the phonics rules that govern each. The beginning of the teacher's instructional sequence with students is shown below. Teacher, listen and tell me what you hear that is the same in each of these words. Sudden velvet kitten napkin contest. When continuing the discussion with students, the teacher should inform students that each of the words presented in the lesson contains which of the following syllable types. A. Vowel digraph syllable. B. Closed syllable. C. Final stable syllable. D. Open syllable. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Step 1. Analyze the words and the lesson. The teacher uses these words as sudden, velvet, kitten, napkin, contest. Observations from the dialogue. Each word has 2 syllables, right arrow multisyllabic. Each syllable has a short vowel sound. Each syllable has 1 vowel followed by a consonant. Step 2. Recall syllable types. The 6 common syllable types are closed syllable, right arrow vowel plus consonant, short vowel sound. For example, kitten, kitten. Open syllable, right arrow ends with a vowel, long vowel sound. For example, he, go vowel consonant T syllable VCE, right arrow long vowel sound ends with silent E. For example, cake vowel team / vowel digraph syllable, right arrow 2 vowels together make 1 sound. For example, team R controlled syllable, right arrow vowel followed by R changes the sound. For example, car final stable syllable, right arrow often in multisyllabic words ends in ler, tion, tor, etc. For example, table, cable. Step 3. Match the words to a syllable type. Sudden, right arrow su, short u, closed, deed and short e, closed. Velvet, right arrow val, short e, closed, vet, short e, closed. Kitten, right arrow kit, short I, closed, ten, short e, closed. Napkin, right arrow nap, short a, closed, kin, short I, closed. Contest, right arrow con, short o, closed, test, short e, closed. White heavy check mark. All syllables are closed syllables. A vowel plus consonant, short vowel sound. Step 4. Eliminate other options. Vowel digraph syllable, right arrow 2 vowels together. None of these words. Final stable syllable, right arrow ends with ler, dion, etc. Non-open syllable, right arrow ends with a vowel. Non-white heavy check mark. Correct answer B. Closed syllable. Flashcard 78. Which of the following statements about the relationship between reading and writing development is best supported by research? A. Both reading and writing are markedly similar with regard to activity, strategy, and purpose. B. Reading and writing are innate skills for which the human brain is naturally wired. C. Developing readers and writers proceed through the same stages to reach proficiency. D. These skills of decoding in reading and encoding in writing reflect similar learning. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. These skills of decoding in reading and encoding in writing reflect similar learning. Step 1. Understand the connection between reading and writing. Research shows that reading and writing are reciprocal processes. Reading involves decoding written words to construct meaning. Writing involves encoding sounds and ideas into written words. Both skills require phonemic awareness, understanding of letter-sound relationships, and vocabulary knowledge, which are interrelated. Step 2. Examine the answer choices. A. Both reading and writing are markedly similar with regard to activity, strategy, and purpose. Not entirely true. Reading and writing overlap but are not identical in strategy or purpose. B. Reading and writing are innate skills for which the human brain is naturally wired. False. Literacy is learned, not innate. C. Developing readers and writers proceed through the same stages to reach proficiency. False. The stages overlap but are not identical. D. These skills of decoding in reading and encoding in writing reflect similar learning. White heavy check mark. Correct. This reflects the research-supported idea that decoding and encoding mirror each other and reinforce literacy development. Key takeaway: decoding equals reading sound, right arrow letter. Encoding equals writing letter, right arrow sound. Strengthening one skill supports the other because both rely on phonics and phonemic awareness. Flashcard 79. While explicitly and systematically teaching phonics to students, a teacher wants to ensure proper phonics maintenance. Which of the following strategies will best meet the teacher's goal? A. Highlighting examples of words and text that introduce a new spelling pattern. B. Using index cards to review previously taught sound-letter relationships. C. Orally manipulating onsets and rhymes in word families as a class. D. Modeling how to break words apart into sounds with small groups. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Using index cards to review previously taught sound-letter relationships. Step 1. Understand phonics maintenance. Phonics maintenance refers to keeping previously taught letter-sound relationships strong over time. so students can automatically recall and apply them when reading and writing. Without consistent review, students may forget earlier phonics patterns, especially as new ones are introduced. Step 2. Examine the options. A. Highlighting examples of words in text that introduce a new spelling pattern. This helps with introducing new patterns, not maintaining old ones. B. Using index cards to review previously taught sound-letter relationships. White heavy check mark. This is explicit, systematic, and focused review, which is exactly what phonics maintenance requires. Index cards allow repeated practice and can target tricky or frequently forgotten patterns. C. Orally manipulating onsets and rhymes in word families as a class, useful for phonological awareness, not directly for maintaining previously taught phonics rules. D. Modeling how to break words apart into sounds with small groups. This focuses on decoding new or unknown words, not reviewing previously learned phonics patterns. Key takeaway: phonics maintenance equals systematic, repeated review of previously taught patterns. Using tools like index cards or flashcards is a research-backed strategy to strengthen long-term retention. Flashcard 80. A first-grade student struggles when reading words with long vowel patterns. Which of the following strategies will best help the student master words such as train, fight, and mow? A. Identifying words with open syllables in an assigned piece of text. B. Memorizing individual word patterns to decode new words. C. Segmenting individual phonemes to decode new words. D. Singing nursery rhymes that contain words with similar patterns. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Memorizing individual word patterns to decode new words. Step 1. Understand the problem. The student struggles with long vowel patterns in words like train, fight, and mow. These are not simple CVC consonant-vowel-consonant words. Long vowels often appear in complex spelling patterns for e.g. I, ig, o. Students need strategies to recognize and decode these patterns automatically. Step 2. Examine the options. A. Identifying words with open syllables in an assigned piece of text. Open syllables ending in a vowel, like me or go, are just one type of long vowel pattern, so this doesn't address all patterns. B. Memorizing individual word patterns to decode new words. White heavy check mark. By learning the spelling patterns train, right arrow AI, fight, right arrow ik, mow, right arrow o, students can apply the patterns to new words. This is a direct phonics strategy targeting long vowel mastery. C. Segmenting individual phonemes to decode new words. Phoneme segmentation works well for short vowels and CVC words, but is less effective for multi-letter long vowel patterns. D. Singing nursery rhymes that contain words with similar patterns. This may provide exposure, but it is not explicit instruction and doesn't ensure the student can decode unfamiliar words with those patterns. Key takeaway: long vowel patterns often require memorization of letter combinations, for example AI, ig, o, rather than just phoneme segmentation. Practicing these patterns systematically helps students decode new words independently. Flashcard 81. A 5th grade teacher has students self-select topics of interest for a research report related to a social studies unit. Before students begin the report, the teacher conducts a series of lessons on how students can appropriately use multiple print and electronic resources to gather information. Then the teacher reviews the steps of the writing process with students before directing them to begin working on the report. Which of the following student actions best demonstrates to the teacher that students have a grasp? A. Following the outline generated. B. Evaluating the organization of the report. C. Recognizing during the drafting stage that adequate content related to a writing subtopic is unavailable and eliminating that content from the report. D. Using a tool such as a checklist during each stage of the writing process. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Using a tool such as a checklist during each stage of the writing process to self-evaluate the inclusion of necessary elements in effective expository text. Step 1. Understand the concepts. The recursive nature of the writing process means that writing is not linear. Writers often move back and forth between writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. With think, add, or remove content as understanding deepens. Self-assess and adjust their work continually. Step 2. Examine the options A. Following the outline generated in the pre-writing stage during the drafting and revision process, this shows planning and structure, but it does not show that the student revisits or evaluates their work recursively. B. Evaluating the organization of the report to determine whether transitions move readers smoothly. This demonstrates revision, but it's a single step, not ongoing recursive engagement across multiple stages. C. Recognizing during the drafting stage that adequate content is unavailable and eliminating it. This shows problem solving during drafting, but again, it's a one-time action, not evidence of ongoing recursive self-monitoring. D. Using a tool such as a checklist during each stage of the writing process. White heavy checkmark. This shows that the student is continuously evaluating their work at each stage, reflecting the recursive nature of writing. The student can revise, add, or remove content at any point based on self-assessment. Key takeaway: recursive writing isn't just moving linearly from pre-writing, right arrow drafting, right arrow revising. Students demonstrate recursion when they monitor, evaluate, and adjust their writing throughout the process, as in using a checklist at every stage. Flashcard 82. While assessing students' reading ability, a teacher notices that many students struggle with words like enough, sign, night, through, and was. Which of the following instructional strategies has the greatest impact on building students' automatic recognition of such words? A. Using an interactive whiteboard to show each word for students to copy into a journal. B. Providing activity sheets with each word for students to trace in pencil or crayon. C. Using an activity in which students read each word aloud, build each word with plastic letters, and write each word. D. Providing each word on a card for students, placing the cards on a ring, and having students practice the words independently. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Using an activity in which students read each word aloud, build each word with plastic letters, and write each word. Step 1. Understand the problem. The words listed enough, sign, night, through, was are irregular or non-decodable words. These are often called sight words, meaning students cannot reliably sound them out using standard phonics rules. Goal: help students develop automatic recognition of these words so they can read them fluently. Step 2. Analyze the options. A. Using an interactive whiteboard to show each word for students to copy into a journal. Mostly visual and passive. Copying alone does not strongly build automatic recognition. B. Providing activity sheets with each word for students to trace in pencil or crayon engages motor memory slightly but still does not integrate multiple senses or active decoding. C. Using an activity in which students read each word aloud, build each word with plastic letters, and write each word. White heavy checkmark. Multisensory approach: visual seeing the word, auditory is saying the word aloud, kinesthetic building the word with letters and writing it. This engages multiple pathways in the brain, improving memory and automatic recognition. D. Providing each word on a card for students, placing the cards on a ring, and having students practice the words independently. Repetition helps, but less multisensory engagement than option C. Key takeaway: irregular sight words require repeated, multisensory practice to become automatic. Option C incorporates seeing, saying, manipulating, and writing, which research shows is most effective for building fluency with non-decodable words. Flashcard 83. A teacher gives students strips of paper like the ones shown in the figure blank at blank n blank 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 blank. The teacher asks the students to add different letters to the front of the letter patterns to create as many words as they can. The activity best develops students' understanding of which of the following? A. Consonant digraphs. B. Schwa sounds. C. Syllable types. D. Word families. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Word families. Step 1. Understand the activity. Students are given word endings or rhymes, e.g. at, and asked to add letters to the beginning to create words. Example: at right arrow cat, bat, sat, mat, and right arrow hen, pen, men, ten. This type of activity emphasizes patterns of spelling within a word family. Step 2. Analyze the options. A. Consonant digraphs focuses on two letters that make one sound, like sh, ch, th. This activity is not about digraphs. B. Schwa sounds focuses on the unstressed vowel sound /schwa/. This activity does not emphasize vowel pronunciation or unstressed syllables. C. Syllable types focuses on patterns like closed, open, vowel, consonant, t, etc. While there is some relation, the activity is primarily about rhyming word patterns, not syllable classification. D. Word families. White heavy check mark. Word families are groups of words that share the same rhyme ending and can be formed by adding different onsets. The activity directly reinforces this concept, helping students notice spelling patterns and improve decoding skills. Key takeaway activities that ask students to add letters to a word ending to form multiple words are classic word family instruction, which is effective for phonics, decoding, and spelling. Flashcard 84. Which of the following instructional techniques is most effective in teaching students the phonemic awareness skill of segmentation? A. Having students identify the odd sound in a sequence of 3 or 4 spoken words. B. Saying a sequence of individual sounds and asking students to combine them to form a word. C. Asking students to recognize the common sound in a set of 3 one-syllable words. D. Pronouncing a word and having students position plastic counters in a row to represent each sound. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Pronouncing a word and having students position plastic counters in a row to represent each sound. Step 1. Understand the skill segmentation. Phonemic segmentation is the ability to break a spoken word into its individual phoneme sounds. Example: cat right arrow /c//a//t/3 sounds. Step 2. Analyze the options. A. Identifying the odd sound in a sequence. This teaches phoneme isolation, not segmentation. B. Combining sounds to form a word. This is blending, the opposite of segmentation. C. Recognizing the common sound in words. This teaches phoneme categorization, not segmentation. D. Using counters to represent each sound. White heavy check mark. Students hear the word, break it into phonemes, and manipulate counters to represent each sound. This is a multisensory approach that explicitly teaches phonemic segmentation, which research shows is effective for early reading development. Key takeaway: segmentation activities should ask students to split words into sounds, often using visual or tactile supports like counters or chips to reinforce the auditory task. Flashcard 85. A team of first-grade teachers writes formative common assessments that will determine whether students possess certain beginning literacy skills. Place the best assessment description with each literacy element. Phonological phonics fluency comprehension. A. Providing students with a base word and telling them to write new words by adding letters to the base. B. Giving students short lists of rhyming words and asking them to verbally add a word to each list. C. Assigning students to work with a partner to orally retell a story the teacher has read to the class. D. Instructing students to read an unfamiliar passage aloud 3 times in a row. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is phonological. B. Giving students short lists of rhyming words and asking them to verbally add a word to each list. Rationale: this assesses phonological awareness, specifically the ability to hear, manipulate, and generate sounds in words. Phonics. A. Providing students with a base word and telling them to write new words by adding letters to the base. Rationale: this assesses phonological awareness, specifically the ability to hear, manipulate, and generate sounds in words. Fluency. D. Instructing students to read an unfamiliar passage aloud 3 times in a row. Rationale: this assesses phonics skills, or the ability to connect sounds with letters and use that knowledge to form words. Comprehension. C. Assigning students to work with a partner to orally retell a story the teacher has read to the class. Rationale: this measures reading fluency, including accuracy, rate, and expression. Flashcard 86. Criteria such as timeliness of information, professional affiliation, bias, and domain suffixes all relate to which of the following factors? A. Considering ethical issues that may arise when designing assessments. B. Respecting cultural knowledge and prior learner experiences when designing instruction. C. Tailoring content, process, products, and learning environments to meet individual learner needs. D. Evaluating and selecting reference materials for student use in classroom research. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Evaluating and selecting reference materials for student use in classroom research. Criteria such as timeliness of information, professional affiliation, bias, and domain suffixes are all key factors for evaluating and selecting reference materials. These help ensure that students use reliable, accurate, and credible sources during classroom research. Flashcard 87. Questions 88-90 refer to the information below. A fifth-grade class is reading the narrative non-fiction story Can't You Make Them Behave, King George, by Jean Fritz. The story details the life of George III, who was King of England when the American Revolution was fought. Read the excerpt below and answer the questions that follow. 1. Firm. 2. From now on he would be firm. 3. After the Battle of Lexington and the Battle of Bunker Hill, King George said he felt strong as a lion. 4. People would soon see, he said, that Americans would back down, meek as lambs. 5. Instead, on July 4, 1776, Americans declared their independence. 6. Naturally, King George was annoyed. 7. But he wasn't worried. 8. How could children, however rebellious, succeed against a firm father? 9. How could a few colonies hold out against a powerful empire? 10. He'd just send a few more regiments over and then watch the A. Pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is C. Instructing students to refer to a list of common affixes that break the words into parts that they can define. Flashcard 88. Questions 88-90 refer to the information below. A fifth-grade class is reading the narrative non-fiction story Can't You Make Them Behave, King George, by Jean Fritz. The story details the life of George III, who was King of England when the American Revolution was fought. Read the excerpt below and answer the questions that follow. 1. Firm. 2. From now on he would be firm. 3. After the Battle of Lexington and the Battle of Bunker Hill, King George said he felt strong as a lion. 4. People would soon see, he said, that Americans would back down, meek as lambs. 5. Instead, on July 4, 1776, Americans declared their independence. 6. Naturally, King George was annoyed. 7. But he wasn't worried. 8. How could children, however rebellious, succeed against a firm father? 9. How could a few colonies hold out against a powerful empire? 10. He'd just send a few more regiments over and then watch the pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is B. Examining the use of a simile to create comparisons. Flashcard 89. Questions 88-90 refer to the information below. A fifth-grade class is reading the narrative non-fiction story Can't You Make Them Behave, King George, by Jean Fritz. The story details the life of George III, who was King of England when the American Revolution was fought. Read the excerpt below and answer the questions that follow. 1. Firm. 2. From now on he would be firm. 3. After the Battle of Lexington and the Battle of Bunker Hill, King George said he felt strong as a lion. 4. People would soon see, he said, that Americans would back down, meek as lambs. 5. Instead, on July 4, 1776, Americans declared their independence. 6. Naturally, King George was annoyed. 7. But he wasn't worried. 8. How could children, however rebellious, succeed against a firm father? 9. How could a few colonies hold out against a powerful empire? 10. He'd just send a few more regiments over and then watch the pause and think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is D. Connect reading and writing by considering examples of characterization.